Beryl was just your average middle-aged swordsman living in a quiet little village. He ran the same dojo his family had owned for generations and spent most of his time training students, fixing old swords, and dealing with his nagging dad. Life was calm, uneventful, and exactly how he liked it. But that peace never lasted long when his father was around. Lately, the old man had been bringing up the same topic almost daily: grandkids. He kept saying that the house felt too quiet and that Beryl was getting too old to stay single forever. Beryl usually brushed it off, reminding him that keeping the dojo running left him no time for dating, let alone starting a family. Still, that didn't stop his dad from pushing. He even joked, well, maybe half-joked, that Beryl should consider marrying one of his students. Beryl didn't find it funny. That was a big no from him. He had his boundaries, and mixing romance into the dojo just didn't sit right with him. The truth was, Beryl had once dreamed of becoming a legendary swordsman, the kind of guy whose name echoed through the capital and was written into the history books. But time passed, and that dream slowly faded into the background. Now he just saw himself as a decent teacher. He wasn't chasing glory anymore, but he was proud of what he'd built. A lot of his students had gone on to become real professionals, knights, adventurers, you name it. After finishing up training for the day, Beryl joined his parents for dinner. As usual, his dad circled the conversation back to marriage. He even tried to drag his wife into it, hoping she'd gang up on Beryl too. But she took a gentler approach, saying that these things take time. Still, she casually threw in that she wouldn't mind having a grandchild sometime soon. Beryl nearly coughed up his food. That was easy to say when you weren't the one still completely single. It's not like someone was just going to magically show up at the door. Of course, that's exactly what happened. Just as he was catching his breath, there was a knock, and when Beryl opened the door, he found a young woman smiling back at him. She looked familiar, and after a second it clicked. She was one of his old students. Her name was Alusha. She'd trained under him years ago and had been one of the most promising learners he'd ever had. He welcomed her in, made some tea, and they sat down to catch up. He'd always known she had potential, but he was honestly shocked to hear that she'd risen all the way to become the commander of the Royal Knights. That was a huge deal. He couldn't even picture himself in a palace, let alone working in one. Turns out, Alusha had pulled some strings. She told him that she'd used her position to get him appointed as a special sword instructor for the Royal Order. Apparently, the approval had already come through as an official order. Beryl didn't really know how to respond. He'd never asked for that kind of role and definitely wasn't prepared for it. His dad, of course, jumped in before he could even think. He made it sound like saying no might cost Beryl his head. Alusha tried to calm things down by saying it wasn't that serious, but even she admitted that ignoring it could lead to some heavy consequences. So basically, Beryl had no choice but to go along with it. There was a carriage already waiting, and before he knew it, Beryl was being packed off to the capital. His dad was completely on board with this sudden career switch and even used the opportunity to nudge him again. Maybe now he'd find a wife, preferably someone like Alusha. Beryl just wanted to crawl into a hole. As the carriage rolled out, Beryl noticed something that caught his eye. Alusha still carried the sword he'd given her when she'd graduated from his dojo. It wasn't fancy or expensive, just a simple, sturdy blade crafted with care. He told her she could easily get something better from the capital's top smiths, but she didn't seem interested. She'd taken care of that sword like it was a treasure, even after all these years. Beryl figured it must be a sentimental thing. Maybe she still saw him as a mentor, and that sword was just a reminder of where she started. But even with all that, Beryl couldn't wrap his head around why someone as accomplished as her wanted him to teach anything. As far as he was concerned, he was just a regular swordsman, with no titles, no fame, and definitely no plan to become anyone important. At that moment, Alusha began talking excitedly about a well-known swordsman coming to the capital. She seemed thrilled about it, but Beryl had no idea who she meant. He didn't think of himself as some backwoods warrior, and he definitely didn't see himself as a master of anything. Still, she claimed he was respected in the world of sword fighting. According to her, he had trained a bunch of people who went on to become powerful fighters and well-known adventurers. It seemed like this guy had a bit of a reputation. Alusha didn't really like the nickname people gave him, but it had stuck anyway. Beryl found it all kind of amusing. He figured she was the only one who actually thought of him in such a grand way. Not long after, they reached the capital city, and Alusha dropped Beryl off at an inn so he could rest. She said she'd return to pick him up the next morning. The following day, she brought him to the castle and introduced him to the group of knights. She told the new trainees that Beryl was incredibly strong, so strong that even she wouldn't stand a chance against him. Because of that, she believed they should feel lucky to be learning from someone like him. But not everyone in the group seemed happy about it. Some of the knights didn't think Beryl was qualified, and one of them looked especially annoyed about the whole thing. Later on, Beryl and Alalucia were walking through the castle halls when she told him he was now officially recognized as a special trainer. She mentioned that he only needed to show up a few times each month to help out with training, so it wouldn't get in the way of his usual work at the dojo. While they were talking, a girl came running toward Beryl, looking like she couldn't hold back her excitement. Her name was Uni. She used to train under Beryl a couple of years ago. He remembered that she always wanted to become part of the Knight's Order, and seeing her in that uniform now made him happy. She wasn't a full knight yet, just a beginner in training, but it was clear she had made some progress. She was glad to be able to learn from Beryl again, and Alusha felt the same way. Later that same day, Beryl returned to his house, but as soon as he stepped inside, he found another familiar face waiting for him. This time it was Randrid, another one of his old students. Randrid had come by to introduce his wife and their newborn baby to Beryl. Beryl was pleased to see him doing so well, but then his father chimed in, joking that Beryl shouldn't come back home until he had a family of his own, just like Randrid. After leaving the dojo, Randrid had worked hard and climbed all the way up to platinum rank as an adventurer, which was a big deal. But now that he had a baby, he wanted to settle down and live a peaceful life back in the village. Beryl was surprised that Randrid was willing to give up such a high position, but he figured it made sense. The life of an adventurer was risky, and Randrid probably didn't want to take any chances now that he had a family. Randrid said he would do his best to keep the dojo running, but Beryl had no idea what he meant by that. That's when Beryl's father explained everything. Since Randrid was a decent fighter and had real experience, he could take over Beryl's role at the dojo. That meant Beryl didn't need to stay there anymore. In other words, his father was basically kicking him out, even though the house technically belonged to Beryl. The next day, Beryl met up with Alusha again and explained the whole thing. He told her that he needed to find a place to live in the city now. The inn he stayed at last night was way too fancy and expensive to stay in long term. He needed something more practical. Alusha was happy to help him look around. She even offered her own house as a place to stay, but Beryl didn't think that would be right. Alusha seemed a bit let down, but she didn't push it. Instead, she suggested they go grab a meal together since it was almost lunchtime. Beryl agreed, and they started heading toward a nearby restaurant. While they were walking through the city streets, someone called out to Alusha in a not-so-friendly tone. It was another woman, clearly not happy to see Alusha walking around with a man and calling him master. It looked like the two of them had some kind of rough history. The other woman thought it was embarrassing for someone like Alusha, a respected knight leader, to be seen hanging around casually with some unknown guy. Beryl tried to keep his head down to avoid drawing attention, but the woman wasn't having it. She reached over and pulled down the cloth covering his face. As soon as she saw him, her attitude completely changed, and she called him Master, too. Beryl was confused because he didn't recognize her at all, but then she told him her name was Serena and reminded him that he had once rescued her and taught her how to use a sword. It took him a minute, but then he remembered. Years ago, he had found a wounded girl, helped her recover, and trained her. He hadn't seen her since, but now she was back, and not just that, she had become a top-rankered adventurer herself. Serena hadn't seen Beryl in years, and even though she felt a little guilty about it, she couldn't help but be curious about what brought him to the royal capital all of a sudden. Alusha was quick to explain everything. Beryl had just been given a position as a special instructor for the Knight's Order, and he was planning to settle down in the city. She was helping him figure out where he'd live from now on. But Serena wasn't impressed. She claimed that, as someone who spent years traveling and staying in different places, she was way better suited to help him find the right spot. That sparked an argument right away. Both of them got caught up in trying to prove who knew Beryl better or who was more qualified to help him. Beryl just stood there, wondering how things had gone from peaceful to chaotic in seconds. He couldn't even understand why these two didn't get along to begin with. After some bickering and back and forth, they eventually helped him find a decent place to live. It wasn't fancy or huge, but it had everything he needed. Beryl was thankful, but he also gently asked them to stop fighting for his sake. He really didn't want his ears ringing from more pointless yelling. That seemed to calm them down. Neither of them said much after that, and they quietly went their separate ways. Later that evening, Beryl stood by the window of his new room. He watched the streets outside, filled with the noise and energy of the city. Life here was definitely more hectic than what he was used to. Still, he couldn't deny it felt good knowing that a bunch of his former students were now around him, looking out for him in their own ways. The next morning, the Knights Order resumed their usual training routines. Among them was the Vice Commander, who was absolutely tearing through the drills with speed and precision. He moved like someone who had trained for years non-stop. After finishing off his sparring partner, Alucia made an announcement to the whole squad. From now on, Beryl would be helping them train more often, starting immediately. No more once-a-week sessions. Things were getting serious. Beryl was still trying to settle in, but he stepped forward, ready to begin. Just before he could start teaching, the Vice Commander stepped up. He wasn't being rude, but he made it clear he needed to know if Beryl really had what it took. According to the rules, he had every right to challenge a newcomer to test their skills. Alucia agreed without hesitation, which frustrated Beryl a bit, but at this point he had no choice. Hendrik believed Alucia might be biased. Maybe she saw Beryl through the lens of childhood admiration, not as a fighter. So he wanted to find out the truth by going head-to-head with him. Strangely enough, Beryl kind of agreed. He never saw himself as anything special, and the thought of messing up and embarrassing Alucia made him nervous. But he couldn't back out now. As the duel began, Hendrik rushed in with aggressive strikes. Beryl blocked each one, feeling the weight and speed behind them. Hendrik was clearly powerful, but after a few swings, Beryl spotted a small opening. He redirected one of the attacks just enough to step in close, bringing his blade to Hendrik's side. That would have been the end in a real fight. They reset, and Hendrik came back stronger. His style was sharp but predictable. Beryl could read the flow of his movements easily. Still, it was clear Hendrik wasn't done. He pulled out his special move, a brutal spinning slash known as the Roaring Blade. It was a technique meant to overwhelm anyone who stood in its path. It couldn't be blocked, and dodging it was just as difficult. But just as the blade cut through the air, Beryl vanished from his line of sight. A second later, he was behind Hendrik with his sword at the man's neck. The duel was over. Hendrik had lost, but instead of being angry, he was stunned. He wasn't bitter, just impressed by the skill it must have taken to pull that off. Later on, Hendrik organized a small gathering to officially welcome Beryl to the team. While the food and drinks were flowing, Hendrik still couldn't stop wondering how Beryl had countered that final move. Beryl explained that he simply moved with the force of the spin, using Hendrik's own momentum to slip behind him. It sounded simple when he said it, but everyone knew that pulling it off required years of experience and perfect timing. From that day on, Hendrik and the rest of the knights gained a new level of respect for Beryl. He might not have thought highly of himself, but the others were more than excited to learn under someone who could fight like that. Will Beryl rise to the challenge or get crushed by the weight of destiny? About a week later, Master Garden was back at it again, leading another training session. Not long into the drills, he calmly paused a pair of trainees and gave one of them a quick tip about keeping the right distance during combat. The student looked a bit confused, so Garden jumped in to show them firsthand. He explained that sometimes just shifting your position can make all the difference, because if your opponent's too focused on your weapon, they won't even notice your feet moving. It sounded like a small detail, but that tiny adjustment could seriously mean the difference between staying safe or getting hurt in a real fight. Once the lesson was over, Beryl noticed the students were listening like it was some mind-blowing discovery, even though it was something pretty basic. After training wrapped up, Blitz caught up with Beryl and handed him a towel. As Beryl wiped his face, he thought, maybe everyone was being extra attentive because of that recent sparring match, the one where Garden handled that soldier without even breaking a sweat. That probably boosted his credibility big time. Later on, Kuni showed up and asked if the teacher was free in the afternoon to help him explore the city. Being from a small village, he felt a bit lost in the urban maze. Since someone had already brought it up earlier, Beryl figured it wouldn't be a bad idea to walk around and get to know the place better. The girl seemed pretty pumped to show him around, too. Beryl couldn't help but think he was doing okay as a trainer. For now, at least. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a high-ranking meeting was going down. The battalion leader was told that the latest training plans had been greenlit. She just had to submit her budget to accounting. Then, the conversation shifted. They wanted to know how the new instructor was doing. Alicia Citrus, who'd been keeping an eye on things, said he was doing even better than expected. After the meeting, she took a quiet moment to reflect. It really hit her how being great with a sword could actually take someone all the way up the ranks. But it also took a lot of time and dedication. There wasn't much room for anything else. Still, she couldn't just leave her mentor behind. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she first met Beryl Garand. Her family had just moved to a nearby town, not far from where Beryl's dojo was. People in the area spoke highly of him, so her parents figured it'd be smart to have her learn some self-defense. Out there, the order didn't keep as close an eye on things, so knowing how to protect yourself was a big plus. At her mom's request, young Elisha introduced herself to the instructor. He greeted her with such warmth that she never forgot it. Soon after, her lessons began. Simple moves at first, but Beryl took the time to explain every little thing clearly. He worked with her to make each move sharper and more controlled. For the next year and a half, she stuck with that routine. It was all new to her, but she never got bored. She actually started feeling stronger and more confident. Bit by bit, the sword felt like a natural part of her. What really made it special was how Beryl always noticed her small wins and celebrated them. That meant a lot. One day during training, Alicia found herself wondering why Rand hadn't shown up yet. Midway through, Beryl switched things up and said they'd now be practicing offensive techniques. Alicia was thrilled. It was something new. But when she stepped up to face him, she suddenly realized there was no obvious gap to attack through. She hesitated, then went for it with a clean strike. Beryl easily dodged and countered, ending the match fast. Still, he complimented her timing, saying she went for it at just the right moment, not just swinging without thinking. Now that she's older, Alicia gets what he meant. Back then, she figured every instructor was like that. But now, she knows just how rare someone like Beryl really is. One day, Beryl took his group to a nearby dojo for a friendly match. The rules were simple. No real hits and nothing aimed at the head. Everyone was just there to test their skills, not to get hurt. First up from Beryl's side was Rand. His opponent came in a little too wild, swinging without much thought, and Rand quickly turned it around by landing a clean counter. Next, Alicia stepped up. As soon as she squared up, she could already tell that her opponent wasn't guarding well. He left himself open like a broken umbrella in a storm. The guy tried throwing all sorts of attacks, but she dodged every one like it was nothing. He did manage to knock her off balance for a second, but the moment she moved in, the match was over. One clean strike and done. On the way back, Beryl talked about how important it is to face different styles, not just people you train with every day. Sasha brought up how it looked like their dojo was unbeatable that day. After all, they had won every round, and Beryl even took down the other dojo's instructor in a final match. Still, he reminded them it wasn't about bragging rights. It was about learning from the experience, not about who looked cooler in the end. While they were walking, Alicia suddenly realized she'd left something behind. Without waiting, she ran back to grab it. But when she got there, some students from the other dojo were waiting. They weren't exactly friendly. They had found her missing item, a small personal trinket, and weren't planning to return it nicely. Instead of giving it back, one of them tossed it to the floor on purpose, acting like she didn't deserve respect just because of a friendly match. He said it wasn't a real win, and that someone like her, from the countryside, didn't belong there. Before she could respond, he tried to hit her. Not with a practice move, but something real. Just in time, Beryl stepped in. His face said it all. This wasn't going to end in a lecture. He blocked the attack like it was second nature. Then, without hurting anyone, he disarmed the boy and moved back the others with a few smooth, controlled moves. But one of the hot-headed students didn't back down. He snatched another sword and tried again. That's when the other dojo's master showed up. He wasn't pleased. He made it clear that even if all the students teamed up, they still wouldn't land a finger on Beryl or anyone from his group. He shut the whole thing down quickly and told the boys off. Beryl, trying to keep the peace, told the master not to be too hard on them. They were just kids acting out. The other master gave a respectful bow and said he'd take full responsibility. That made Beryl feel a little awkward, like things had blown out of proportion. On their way home, Beryl admitted that something had felt off when Alusha went back alone, and he was glad he followed. Alusha felt pretty bad seeing her teacher get hurt on her behalf, but Beryl didn't scold her. He said it was on him for not stopping her sooner and putting her in a risky situation. In the end, no one was seriously hurt, but the moment stuck with both of them. It was one of those days that reminded them, training's important, but character matters even more. Alicia got a bit emotional, and to lighten the mood, Beryl took her out to grab a bite. She didn't really explain why she teared up, but deep down, it wasn't about being scared or anything like that. It was more that she realized sometimes, when you feel a lot all at once, the tears just come out, whether you want them to or not. Not long after that, Alicia and her teacher squared off in a practice match again. This time, things were different. Beryl kicked things off like usual, calm and collected. But Alicia moved faster than ever before, slipping past his guard and managing to take the upper hand for the first time ever. That's when Beryl handed her a proper sword, telling her she was finally ready. Alicia didn't really believe it. She still saw herself as someone with a long way to go, but she accepted the sword anyway. Even if her heart wasn't ready to leave, she didn't want to burden her teacher with her doubts. After that, she went out to chase her own path. But one thing stayed clear in her mind. No one moved or reacted quite like Beryl. When she took the entrance exam for a well-known order, her thoughts were confirmed. She breezed through the challenges. The other trainees and even the examiners couldn't keep up with the skills she'd picked up back at the countryside dojo. Eventually, she climbed the ranks fast, becoming a commander. And when she finally got the chance to choose an instructor, she couldn't help but think about Beryl. It had been years since she left, but when she visited him, he was still sharp, maybe even sharper than before. Some folks might say she was being dramatic, but to her, Beryl was the best teacher out there, so she made it her personal goal to put his name out there. Jumping back to the present, after a training session, Alicia caught up with her team. She asked how things went, and one of the guys mentioned how Beryl still manages to surprise everyone with his moves. He also mentioned Beryl went out exploring with Kinney, which made Alicia feel a tiny bit jealous since she had planned to hang out with him too, but she brushed it off. Meanwhile, Beryl was soaking in the sights of the city. The market was way bigger than anything back home. He thought about checking out the northern part of town, but Kinney suggested another area. She joked that the usual tourist spots were just for small-town folks. That's when Beryl started to realize how out of place he really was here. As they strolled around, a voice called out to them. Another one of Beryl's old students spotted him in the crowd. He didn't recognize her at first. She'd changed a lot. But when she showed him the sword he'd given her years ago, it all came back. Her name was Fial. She had been gone for about 5 years, and she'd grown a ton since then. Kinney mentioned that Fial was now a standout in the city's magic unit, which confused Beryl, since he only ever taught sword stuff. Turns out, Fial had started using magic too. She showed off a fiery trick that made it clear she wasn't just leaning on fancy tools, she had real skill. Beryl was impressed, even if a little sad she'd moved away from swordsmanship. But seeing how far she'd come filled him with pride. Just then, a pickpocket snatched an old woman's bag and ran. Before Beryl or Kinney could do anything, Fial stepped in and used her sword to cast a spell that tied the thief up mid-run. Simple, clean, effective. She explained that she still used everything she'd learned from the dojo, just added magic on top. The next morning, Beryl went for his usual early walk. It helped him feel grounded in this fast-paced city life. He wandered into the West District to scout out a nice spot to take his students for a meal later. Out of nowhere, a tiny girl jumped in his way, trying to grab his attention. He thought she was a kid who got lost and was about to help, but she introduced herself as Lucy Diamond, commander of the Magic Corps from the Liberalist Kingdom. Beryl figured the city kids had some wild imaginations. Lucy was getting fed up with being seen as just a kid. To make her point, she lit up a small flame in her hand, proving she wasn't someone to be underestimated. With a confident smirk, she hinted that walking with someone was way more fun than doing it alone, suggesting she stick around for their little morning stroll. Beryl, amused, agreed, and they continued walking together. Lucy shared some gossip she'd heard from Fial, mentioning how her old teacher had been spotted around the city, hinting that maybe Beryl had been involved in some kind of high-level training. She also mentioned that Fial was pretty skilled with magic, but Lucy wasn't too far behind with her sword skills. Curious, Beryl asked if Lucy had any interest in learning swordsmanship, but she quickly corrected him, pointing out that she wasn't exactly a kid and was older than she looked. They made their way to an empty lot where an old building had once stood. Lucy told him that she loved magic so much that she practiced daily, always pushing herself to get better. Now it was time to see just how far she'd come. Beryl agreed that it was important to check your progress, but what he didn't expect was that he'd become the target of her test. Before he knew it, she cast a fireball right at him, throwing him off guard. With a grin, she complimented his reflexes but didn't let up. She created a circle of flames around her, showing she was taking things seriously. Feeling like he had no choice, Beryl unsheathed his sword, ready to face off with her. As Lucy prepared another attack spell, her expression grew serious. Seeing that, Beryl realized she wasn't joking around anymore, so he changed his stance. He had to start defending himself for real now. Just before she launched her next spell, Lucy asked if he was ready, but when she noticed he wasn't, she reminded him of something important he'd said earlier, that progress matters. So she asked him if he still believed he wasn't on her level. Beryl admitted that it wasn't that he was above her, rather, he wasn't as skilled as she believed. But Lucy didn't want to argue. She preferred to test it herself. Without another word, she hurled a massive fireball at him. He barely managed to dodge it, but before he could catch his breath, she fired a rapid series of flame shots in his direction. Beryl did his best to evade them, and though he blocked one with his sword, he felt the intense heat and force behind it. That's when Lucy smirked and said they were just getting started. She switched to ice magic, casting sharp frozen projectiles. Beryl cut them mid-air to defend himself, but as soon as he noticed her preparing another spell, he closed the distance at high speed. Since he couldn't attack her for real, he aimed to knock her out with the hilt of his sword. In a flash, he was right in front of her. But before he could land the blow, Lucy summoned a wall of fire, forcing him to back off. She pointed out that magic had its perks. It could be used just like that. Then she added that she wasn't even using her full strength yet. With a flick of her hand, dozens of fireballs materialized in the air and came crashing down like meteors. This time, Beryl didn't try to block them. He ran at full speed to avoid the area-wide attack. Seeing him flee like that, Lucy asked if this was his first time fighting a mage. Beryl admitted it was. After all, he knew that swordsmen and mages usually weren't evenly matched. Once that spell ended, she quickly cast another, this time summoning a massive, heavy crystal ball to crush him. Beryl barely managed to deflect it using brute force, throwing it back in her direction. Lucy destroyed it effortlessly, but the impact caused a smokescreen. Beryl used that to rush her again, but just as he was about to strike, he was stopped by a sudden electric barrier. Lucy told him she hadn't meant to go this far, but now it was time for her final move. She began casting a different kind of spell. Beryl saw it as a chance to strike, but his instincts screamed at him to stop. Just standing there, he realized, if that spell hit him, he was done for. A few moments later, Lucy stopped her spell and told him the duel was over. She admitted she got carried away like a kid, and if that final spell hadn't affected him, there was no point in continuing. She really thought she'd scare him off. Bear was glad she was satisfied. Out of curiosity, he asked what would have happened if she'd actually launched that spell. Calmly, she said, "You'd be mincemeat." Though she had toned it down, it still would have left him a shredded mess. She then praised him for his sharp instincts and said now she understood why fish admired him. Beryl responded that she was kind, but if she kept throwing spells like that, she would have killed him. He also admitted he'd been doing this for years and still hadn't managed to beat his own father. Lucy was intrigued, especially by how he didn't seem angry despite such a dangerous fight. Beryl explained that, yeah, it felt like he was in trouble, but somehow it wasn't worth getting mad about. Lucy laughed at that, teasing him for being so calm when he could have died. Changing the topic, she invited him to visit the Magic Institute sometime. She wanted to make up for today. Beryl replied that he didn't have any magical talent, but he'd try. Lucy grinned and told him that next time she learns a new spell, she'll test it on him again. He immediately refused. Later that day, Beryl finished his instructor duties and was walking down a hallway when he ran into Fish. He asked if she was there for work. She said yes. She came to deliver potions from the Magic Brigade to the Order. Then she handed him one as a gift. Beryl declined, saying it was too expensive, but Fish explained it was an apology. After all, Commander Lucy had told her everything that happened. Beryl was surprised. That young woman was really her commander? Fish clarified. Lucy used magic to stay young-looking. No one even knows her real age. Fish apologized for telling Lucy about him, but Beryl told her not to worry and accepted the potion. He added that he was nearly a dead man. Lucy wouldn't stop throwing fire and ice at him, and it nearly tore him apart. Honestly, it made him think twice about ever fighting a mage again. Fish explained that Lucy was special. It wasn't normal to launch so many fire spells one after the other. Just then, Luia showed up to thank Fish for the potions. Fish left to deliver them, giving Luia a chance to talk to Beryl in private. Sharina was there too. Turns out, they wanted Beryl to train some new adventurers. It would help the guild a lot. Ashurna said she had come to get permission from the Order and even had a signed request from the guild leader. Alusha confirmed it was official. Beryl asked what kind of training they needed. Serena said they had to prepare for their first cave raid and learn emergency tactics. Beryl sighed. He remembered how valuable the loot from monsters could be, and sometimes even treasures were hidden inside caves. There was a time he dreamed about all that. As a kid, he'd gone into those caves with high hopes, only to get beaten down by a monster and run home scared. Still, despite the danger, Sharina insisted it would be fine if he helped. Alusha didn't seem excited, but said it was a chance to put his skills to good use. Shurna agreed, but the two women clearly didn't get along. Before Beryl could respond, Surana advised him to talk to the guild leader first. Alusha reminded him that the Order didn't require exclusivity from their special instructors, so it was his choice. Later, Beryl visited the Adventurers Guild with Sharena. It was near the Order's HQ. He was guided to a meeting room, and to his surprise, Lucy was already there. He asked what she was doing. She replied that she'd heard he was coming, so she waited. Sharena added that Lucy was in charge of the Magic Brigade and knew the guild leader well. Then the guild leader introduced himself as Nidos, leader of the Liberus Adventurers Guild. Beryl did the same, and Nidos shook his hand with a friendly smile. If Sharena recommended him, Nidos said, then he knew Beryl was someone trustworthy. Beryl clarified that he hadn't accepted the offer yet, but right after that, Lucy also said she recommended him, which put Beryl in a tough spot. It made it harder to refuse. At least they weren't planning to underpay him. Soon after, Nidus introduced his assistant Maija, who would help finalize the details. But before that, Maija had a concern to clear up. He knew Beryl had zero experience as an adventurer. Sure, he'd been recommended by a black-rank adventurer and a brigade commander, but sending someone inexperienced on a cave raid? That didn't sit right. Beryl actually saw this as a blessing in disguise. Maybe he could use this as a way out of the mission. But before he could say anything, Sharena scolded Maigan for being disrespectful toward her master. Lucy also wasn't happy. She didn't like that Maigan was doubting her judgment. Still, Midgen stood firm. He reminded them that the guild was responsible for everyone's safety, and lately there had been reports of unusual monster activity. Nidus agreed with that last point and asked Midgen what he was suggesting exactly. Midgen proposed that Beryl prove himself by facing Sharana and her twin swords. That way, they could judge his real combat skills firsthand. Everyone thought it was a great idea, except Beryl. but even then he was pressured to go along with it. They were taken to the training grounds. Shurina looked excited. Finally, a chance to spar with him. Flashbacks began to play from Shurina's past. She was just a child, riding in a carriage through the mountains with her parents, when suddenly a monster attacked them without warning. In the chaos, her mother threw her off the cliff, sacrificing herself to save her. Shurina fell straight into a river. When she regained consciousness, the first thing she saw was Beryl. He had come to rescue her. Later, he brought her to his home so she could be treated. Once he found out her name, he asked about her parents, but the moment he did, she clutched her head in pain. She'd taken a serious blow, and the trauma from the attack only made it worse. The old man in the house assumed her parents didn't survive, judging by the situation. Beryl asked them to let her stay until they could find her a proper home. They gave her food, and her condition slowly improved. But Shurina remained silent. She was still trying to process everything that happened. Despite that, they patiently gave her the space she needed. Later on, Shurina watched Beryl train. He invited her to join, saying it would be a good distraction. She agreed, and as soon as he saw the way she moved with the sword, he praised her natural talent. That made her genuinely happy. From that moment on, she kept training and slowly began to recover emotionally. When Beryl started working at the dojo as an instructor, he noticed she was too shy to join the other students, so he encouraged her to take part. Eventually, he told her she was quick and agile, and that twin swords would suit her fighting style. In time, he found a good family willing to take her in. Shurina, naturally, felt heartbroken at the news. They assured her that she'd have a much better future with this new family. In return, Shurina sincerely thanked Beryl for everything. Deep down, she wanted to stay with him forever, but she knew that asking for more than what she'd already received as a child would be selfish. Time passed and Shurina became a gold-rank adventurer. In one mission, she was ambushed by a group of bandits. Her partner warned her the leader was a former elite swordsman. Even so, Shurina charged forward without hesitation and defeated them with ease. One of her reasons for becoming an adventurer was her desire to see the world with her own eyes. But more than that, she never wanted anyone else to suffer the way she had, and she wanted to use the sword skills that her master, Beryl, had taught her. Back in the present, Shurina wanted to show him just how far she'd come. As a sign of respect, she gave him a formal warrior's salute before the duel began. Beryl appreciated the gesture. If she was serious about fighting him, then he knew he had to give it his all. Moments later, Shurina made the first move, leaping high into the air and launching a direct strike toward him. Lucy blocks and dodges Shurina's attacks, quickly realizing just how fast she's become. On the other hand, Shurina feels even more excited, noticing she can't land a single hit. After all, this is her master, the one she once dreamed of facing at his peak, and now, that dream is becoming a reality. As Variel keeps up with her relentless assault, he understands something clearly. She's been training hard all this time. There's no way she could move like this otherwise, and that fills him with pride. He also notices she's not slowing down at all, and her stamina is outstanding. Still, he spots a weakness. Just as Shurina launches another attack with one of her twin swords, Variel seizes the moment, driving his weapon through her hilt and disarming her. Shurina steps forward to counter, but he sweeps her leg, knocking her to the ground and leaving her completely exposed. With his weapon pointed at her, the duel is over. Shurina's reaction? She smiles and thanks him, while the watching crowd erupts into cheers over the incredible sparring match. Variel tells Shurina that if they had fought for 10 more seconds, she would have worn herself out, but luckily he noticed just in time that she still hasn't mastered her left side. She's surprised, admitting she needs to keep training until her left can hit as hard as her right. Lucy chuckles, teasing that it's funny seeing a rookie giving advice to someone of black rank, but she doesn't actually mind at all. Meanwhile, Maijin apologizes for ever doubting Variel's ability, and Nidus confirms that from now on, Variel will be in charge of training the new adventurers. Variel thanks them, but deep down, he's annoyed that he couldn't talk his way out of it. When the day finally arrives for him to start the job, he meets his 3 new recruits, Porta, Nidri, and Sir Likats. Serena explains that Porta and Nidri are bronze rank, while Sir Likats is silver. Training begins. Serena leads the team into a nearby cave but lets the rookies handle everything themselves. Sarlikats uses a detection artifact to track monsters, and the three of them work well together to take down the first few enemies they encounter. Once they clear the cave, Serena notes it's strange that there weren't more monsters around. Just as they are about to exit, the detection device suddenly breaks down, and Porta rushes ahead, not hearing the others' warnings in time. Out of nowhere, a massive monster ambushes them violently. Serena immediately recognizes it in Xenogravel, a beast designed specifically for hunting. Beryl couldn't believe his luck. He never wanted to be in this mess, yet here he was, facing off against a monster. He turned to Shayna, hoping she had some potions to help. She had 2 magical ones, but before he could make a plan to help Porta, Shayna misunderstood everything and dashed off to save her friend. That left Beryl alone to deal with Xenogravel, the griffin. The fight kicked off, and even though Beryl was getting on in years, he held his ground against the beast. He swung his sword, but the griffin's armor was tougher than he expected. He knew that if the creature landed a hit on him, it would be game over. Meanwhile, Cherno Lissandro was rushing Porta into the dungeon. Beryl knew he had to stall the griffin, but he took a hit that, while he blocked it, still sent him flying and left a nasty gash on his arm. Not one to back down, he figured the creature's weak spot was its face, so he tried to get closer. Just as he moved in, the griffin shot a fireball from its beak, nearly roasting him. Beryl still tried to strike, but the monster dodged and swiped at him with its tail. Showing his skills, he managed to slice off the griffin's tail while using his sword to shield himself from the damage. The griffin went wild, breathing fire like never before. Beryl had to scramble away, but he took a headbutt that he couldn't dodge, and the beast dragged him into the forest, taking off into the sky with him on its back. Once he wriggled free from the griffin's head, he found himself soaring high above the ground. A fall from this height would mean certain death, but Beryl held on tight to the creature's feathers until it finally landed. Still furious, the griffin let out a roar that turned the ground into lava. Beryl jumped onto a nearby rock to avoid getting burned, but he realized the lava was creeping into the dungeon where his friends were trying to save Porta. Inside, Neri and Slackcats were struggling to pull Porta to safety, but the lava was rising fast, threatening to engulf them. Hearing Neri's scream, Beryl knew he had to act quickly. He carefully made his way across the lava-covered ground and aimed for the griffin's face. But the creature was in a frenzy, firing off fireballs everywhere. Beryl dodged and weaved around the lava, getting closer to the griffin. Finally, he found the right moment and plunged his sword into the beast's eye, causing serious damage. However, the griffin retaliated by breaking Beryl's sword, leaving him unarmed and in a tough spot. Just then, Sheena Leandra made a surprise comeback, leaping out from behind Xenogravel and plunging her twin blades into the monster's back, finally ending the tough fight. After the dust settled, she claimed they won thanks to Beryl's efforts. But he wasn't so sure about that. Beryl pointed out that she had arrived late, giving the griffin a chance to wreck his sword. But all he really cared about was how Porta was doing. Sheena reassured him that Porta would be fine, and Beryl felt relieved when he saw the 3 young adventurers come out of the labyrinth, even though Porta was unconscious. Sheena's comment about how this reminded her of the old days made Beryl think back to a time that made him nod in agreement. Later, Shenet returned to the guild headquarters, and everyone was amazed that they had taken down a special target while also protecting 3 recruits. Shenet made sure to give Beryl credit, saying none of it would have happened without him. She insisted that without the professor's help, they would have been in serious trouble. The guild leader Midis was so grateful he didn't know how to thank Beryl, while Mejun expected nothing less from someone who had faced a tough opponent before. Just as the guild leader was about to invite Beryl to join their ranks, Beryl politely declined before he could finish. After the meeting, Shanae remarked that Beryl could never just be an adventurer. Beryl thought they were giving him too much credit, but Shanae apologized for hyping him up too much. He told her it wasn't her fault, even if the compliments were a bit much. Shanae insisted that Beryl was incredibly strong, and she was thankful he let her fight alongside him in such a dangerous situation. Beryl thanked her back, saying her choices were spot on and helped keep everyone alive. He was proud to see her growing so much. Moved by the moment, Shayna started reminiscing about their past together, but realizing she might be getting a bit sentimental, she quickly changed the subject. After all the excitement with Shayna, Beryl found himself with another old student, Keeney, who was taking him to one of the city's blacksmiths. Beryl was puzzled because he thought Alicia had more to do, so he didn't get why Keeney was tagging along. To keep the conversation going, Keeney stressed how important it was to pick a good sword, saying it was her duty as an officer to help Beryl on this important trip. Beryl was trying to hide his embarrassment while Alicia muttered to herself about how Leandra had taken charge of finding a place to stay and Keeney had snagged the trip to the blacksmith. She felt like she needed to pitch in somehow. Beryl asked if she said something, but she quickly brushed it off. To break the awkward vibe, he asked what the blacksmith was like. Alicia told him it was better if he just waited to see for himself. When they arrived, the blacksmith greeted them warmly, and Beryl recognized that voice. It was Balder, who also recognized Beryl after all these years. Beryl was impressed by the shop, and Alicia asked how they knew each other. Beryl introduced Balder as another former student, the only one who was actually older than him. Balder had wanted to make great swords, so he joined the dojo to learn what it was like to wield one. Beryl was happy to see Balder had started his own business, and Balder was surprised to see Beryl again. Keeney asked Balder to sharpen her short sword, but when he saw the chips in the blade, he suggested she should probably get a new one since this one had seen better days. Alicia found it odd that Keeney's weapon was in such rough shape, since she usually took good care of her gear. Beryl then asked Keeney how she felt using a short sword, and she said it was comfortable and light. Both Beryl and Balder immediately realized that this wasn't the right fit for a warrior like her. If she couldn't feel the weight of her weapon, she wouldn't be able to use it effectively. Beryl suggested she try a two-handed sword instead, saying that even though she was short, Keeney was strong, and this type of sword would suit her perfectly. Balder quickly handed her a two-handed sword to try, and she was surprised it didn't feel heavier. Beryl was convinced this was the right choice for her. Keeney decided to buy the two-handed sword, feeling its presence was impressive. With that sorted, it was time for Beryl to think about getting a sword for himself. He started looking around the shop for something interesting. Alicia thought that with his skills he should get a custom-made sword, but Beryl didn't want to go that far, saying the weapons on display were already quite appealing. Just then, Shanae walked into the shop looking for Balder and ran into someone she didn't want to see, Volusian. The two girls immediately fell into a silent rivalry for the attention of their beloved sensei. Beryl stepped in to ease the tension and asked why Leandra was there. She explained that she wanted to make a longsword from the claw of the griffin they had defeated. Balder was shocked to see it was a griffin claw, but didn't understand why she wanted another weapon since her current ones were already impressive. Leandra replied that it was for her master, as he had made things much easier since he arrived. Beryl felt it wasn't fair for him to get a new weapon since it was Leandra who brought the griffin's claw. Alicia pointed out that if fairness was the goal, the order should have already provided proper equipment for Beryl, but she could handle that herself. Meanwhile, Leandra insisted that her gift be accepted as a way to repay Beryl for everything he had done for her, especially since she felt responsible for what happened in the dungeon. As Beryl tried to figure out how to handle all the drama around him, Balder urged him to just accept Leandra's offer, since she genuinely wanted to help. Grateful for her kindness, Beryl agreed, which made Shayna happy, but left Elisha feeling a bit down, since he was getting his hands on materials from a named monster. Balder looked like a kid who just got a new toy, practically bouncing with excitement to start working with the griffin claw, but Beryl made it clear he just wanted a regular sword. Balder assured him he wasn't planning anything wild, even though his eager expression suggested otherwise. Beryl thought Balder might feel guilty about Leandra's generosity, but really, he just wanted to work with that rare material. Balder asked for a week to make the weapon, and Beryl thought he was off the hook for the day, but Keeney had other ideas. Since he recommended the two-handed sword, she figured it would be a good idea for him to give her some tips on how to use it. So, he took her to the training area and explained that the two-handed sword had two main features. First, when she swung it, she should move it side to side, using the centrifugal force to create a whip-like effect at the end of the swing, which was way more effective than just striking straight down. The second tip was to use the non-sharp part of the blade for support, which would help shift the center of gravity and make it easier to handle. Beryl handed her a wooden replica of the sword to practice with. Keeney tried a few swings but lost her balance. Beryl reminded her to use her hips, not just her arms. Once she followed his advice, her movements improved. Watching her progress, Beryl thought about how this was always the first thing he taught in the dojo, so it wasn't hard for Keeney to pick it up. The scene reminded him of when she was just a kid after a long day of training. As night fell, Beryl headed to the tavern to relax after the day's events. He wasn't just there to unwind, he was also celebrating the success of his students. After leaving money for the drinks on the table, he stepped outside and made his way back to the lodging, reflecting on how talented and sweet Keeney was. He thought that if she could just refine her sword skills, she'd really excel with the two-handed sword. On his way, a hooded girl tried to pickpocket him, but he caught her hand just in time. In response, she conjured a huge fireball that forced Beryl to step back, giving her a chance to escape. Confused by this sudden magic, he stood there as she slipped away and reached a hidden wooden door. Inside, she tossed some items and coins onto a table where some men were playing dice. She claimed it was the day's haul, but one of the men accused her of being lazy. Another man defended her, saying she needed to earn a living. Ignoring the comments, the girl realized she had dropped her necklace during the attempted theft from Beryl. Meanwhile, Beryl picked up the necklace he found on the ground and examined it closely. As Beryl tried to make sense of the unfolding drama, the next day at the training hall, Karuni is still working hard with her new oversized sword. On the other side of the hall, Himblitz is sparring with Beryl, but still hasn't managed to land a single hit on him. For his final attack, Himblitz fakes a downward slash, but his real target is Beryl's stomach. Beryl is impressed by the clever move, but still manages to block it. Himblitz loses once again. Even so, he thanks Beryl for the lesson, and Beryl compliments him on how much he's improved in such a short time. It was almost perfect, but not quite enough to beat Beryl's reflexes. After that, Himblitz glances at Karuni and comments that it takes real courage to switch weapons like she did. He thinks she has great potential. Something important right now, especially because the Knight's Order needs to strengthen its forces to face a group known as the Dark Hand of Twilight. Recently, Twilight thieves have started causing trouble in the capital. In response, the Royal Guard and the Knight's Order have launched a joint investigation. If they can locate the thieves' hideout, they plan to raid it and arrest every last member. But to guarantee victory, they'll need serious power. And Karuni could be a key part of that. Of course, Himblitz believes Beryl alone could wipe out the Twilight thieves if he wanted to. But he doesn't want to bother Beryl with that kind of work. He tells him it's better to leave it to the Knight's Order. As for Beryl, he's not interested in hunting criminals anyway. He's never fought them before and has no intention of starting now. But then, he remembers the ring he took from the thief the night before. Maybe it could help with the investigation. When Karuni sees the ring in his hand, she assumes Beryl's planning to give it as a gift. Himblitz jumps on that idea immediately. Beryl tries to explain that it's not a gift, but before he can speak, Karuni tells him that if he's going to propose to Alucia, he'd better pick a bigger ring, because that one looks like it came from a toy store. Beryl has no idea where she got the idea he was proposing to anyone. Finally, he manages to explain. A thief tried to rob him last night, and he grabbed her hand before she could steal anything. But she escaped. He was caught off guard when she used magic on him. He finds the whole thing strange. If she knew magic, why would she need to steal? Magic users are rare, and anyone with magical ability can study at the Libre Magic Institute with all expenses paid. Himblitz suggests maybe she just used a magical accessory to create fire. But for now, he asks Beryl what he plans to do with the ring. Beryl says he doesn't want to keep it, and since it's probably stolen, he'd rather return it to the rightful owner. So Hemblitz tells him to just leave it at the Knight's Order front desk. Beryl agrees, and that's exactly what he does. With that done, Beryl has no interest in getting involved further. He didn't lose anything to the thief and doesn't plan to look for her. But something about the way the girl looked at him during that brief moment still bothers him. As he walks through town, Beryl decides to check out some rental houses. He can't stay at the barracks forever, but the prices almost give him a heart attack. He could technically afford it on his Knight's Order salary, but it's still way too expensive. While thinking it over, he notices a young girl behind him who looks like she's searching for something. He approaches to ask if she needs help, only to realize it's the same girl who tried to rob him last night. He asks if she's looking for a ring, and as soon as she hears that, she attacks, thinking Beryl stole it from her. He tries to calm her down, saying he doesn't want to make a scene. First, he tells her the ring's already been turned in to the Knight's Order. He knows she won't be able to get inside the building on her own. Then he asks, did she really steal the ring? Because if not, why is it so important to her? The girl replies that she didn't steal it. That's enough for Beryl. He offers to go with her to get it back, and though she hesitates at first, he explains it'll be easier if he vouches for her. Eventually she agrees, but makes it clear she's not happy about it. At Knight's Order HQ, Beryl retrieves the ring, but before handing it over, he asks to speak with her privately. Just then, Alucia shows up and sees Beryl with the mysterious girl. Jumping to conclusions, she assumes the girl must be Beryl's secret daughter. He quickly denies it. They all go inside so Beryl can explain everything. Once Alucia hears the full story, she asks what he plans to do with the girl. Normally, as a knight, she'd expect him to arrest her for theft. But Beryl doesn't want to see her punished. He asks the girl, will she stop stealing if he lets her go? She doesn't answer. Instead, she just demands the ring back. It's clear she has no intention of quitting theft. But because she's being honest about it, Beryl can't help but think she still has some good in her. Alucia brings up the fact that the girl used magic. Was it from an accessory or her own ability? The girl's name is Mevi, and she says it was her own magic. Azukia explains that if she really has magical talent, the kingdom would take care of her. She wouldn't have to steal to survive. Mevi finally opens up. She says she can't stop. She owes 5 million Doc. Her master told her that if she can gather that amount, he'll use magic to bring her little brother back to life. But Mevi didn't have enough time to earn that kind of money through legal means, so she was forced to resort to stealing. Beryl immediately suspected that Mevi's boss was lying to her. After all, bringing someone back from the dead was impossible, but he knew Mevi wouldn't believe him if he said that now. Alucia suddenly stepped out for a moment to check on something, leaving just Beryl and Mevi alone. Beryl offered her some cookies, but Mevi declined, even though she was clearly starving. So Beryl decided it'd be better to buy her some bread instead. When he returned, he handed it to Mevi, and she eagerly started eating. Beryl was glad he got to meet Mevi today. He'd been thinking about her since yesterday, especially after seeing the sadness on her face. He felt happy to have helped her in some way, and with that, he returned the ring to her. Now that Mevi had what she came for, she said she'd be leaving, but before she could step outside, Lucy arrived. Alucia had apparently told her about Mevi's potential with magic. Lucy introduced herself as the head of the Magic Corps and invited Mevi to join the Magic Institute, which was always open to anyone with magical abilities. But Mevi declined, saying it wouldn't help her earn the 5 million Doc she needed. Lucy asked what the large sum was for, and Mevi explained she needed it to pay a wizard who promised to resurrect her deceased sibling. But as soon as Mevi said that, Lucy interrupted, telling her she'd been scammed. There's no such thing as resurrection magic. It simply doesn't exist. Still, Mevi insisted it was real. She believed what she saw. In her memory, the so-called wizard had made her sibling's body move a little. At the time, she was so overwhelmed by grief that she truly believed he could bring her sibling back to life. The wizard had told her that he needed 5 million Doc to complete the process. So ever since then, Mevi started stealing just to save up the money. Lucy was heartbroken to hear Mevi had been deceived in such a cruel way, and repeated that resurrection magic wasn't real. Even if Maeve accused her of lying, Lucy firmly stated she was a respected witch who had studied magic for hundreds of years. If resurrection magic were real, she would have known about it long ago, certainly not from some nobody pretending to be a wizard. It was at this moment that Maeve began to realize maybe she had been fooled. Lucy then asked Maeve the name of the wizard behind it all. Maeve questioned why she wanted to know, and Lucy explained that she planned to confront him directly, to find out whether he was truly lying about resurrection magic. And if, by some miracle, he was telling the truth, Lucy promised she'd personally pay the $5 million to bring Maeve's sibling back. But if he was lying, then that meant he'd desecrated the soul of Maeve's sibling, and she wouldn't let that go unpunished. That's when Maeve revealed the wizard's name, Twilight, the same name as the leader of the Twilight Thieves. Lucy then told Maeve to come with her immediately. Lucia stepped in and said she also wanted to go, but bringing a knight would draw too much attention. So instead, she asked Beryl to go along. Soon, they arrived at the hideout. Beryl was shocked. It was just off the main road. He regretted not bringing a real sword, but Lucy assured him his wooden one would be more than enough against common thugs. With no reason to wait, Lucy blew the front door open. Inside, they were immediately attacked by a group of thieves. One of them tried to grab Lucy, but she had no time for that. She blasted him across the room with an explosion spell. She asked Beryl to handle the rest, while she went straight to find Twilight. Some of the thieves noticed Maeve behind Beryl and assumed she had betrayed them, so one tried to stab her. But Beryl struck him in the throat with his wooden sword. Even though it was just wood, a hit like that to the neck hurt bad, and the bandits started to hesitate. While Beryl fought upstairs, Lucy went straight down to the basement to confront Twilight. The moment he saw her, Twilight activated a magic accessory to launch yellow projectiles at her. But Lucy, being a master mage, wasn't fazed. She melted the attack and continued walking toward him. Twilight had other tricks. He used telekinesis to lift Lucy into the air. That's when she realized this was probably what he used to fool Maeve. Twilight confessed. He'd used telekinesis to move Maeve's sibling's body slightly, pretending to be a necromancer. And even now, he laughed about how gullible she had been, believing he could raise the dead. He prepared a fireball to finish Lucy off, but Lucy had had enough. She cast a powerful wind spell, slamming him to the ground with overwhelming pressure. Meanwhile, Beryl had just finished dealing with the rest of the thieves upstairs. One of them stood up again and scolded Maeve for being ungrateful, claiming Twilight had done so much for her. Beryl, now furious, smacked him in the throat again, knocking him out cold. Eventually, Lucy emerged from the basement, dragging Twilight's body with her. She demanded he tell Maeve the truth, or he'd be blown away again. Cornered, Twilight confessed he had lied. Resurrection magic didn't exist. Maeve was devastated. That meant her sibling was truly gone forever. And now that the bandits were defeated, Lucy said she'd be contacting the Knight's Order to have Twilight and his gang arrested. A little while later, the bandits were loaded onto a prison wagon. Lucia thanked Beryl and Lucy for their help, but there were still unanswered questions, like how Twilight had access to such powerful magical accessories. Those weren't something a low-level criminal could easily get. It meant someone more powerful was behind it all, and they needed to find out who. As the prison wagon rolled away, a man hidden in the shadows watched. He reached out his hand toward the cart, causing Twilight's body to glow from within, before he died in unimaginable pain. Later, the mysterious man reported to his master that Twilight had been silenced using a hidden magic device planted inside his body. Now, there was no risk of their plans being exposed. The Pope was pleased with the news. He intended to use the corpses Twilight had gathered to create a miracle with his own hands, and nothing would stop him. The day after training wrapped up, Lucia pulled Beryl aside for a private talk. She shared some heavy news. Twilight had died while being taken to prison. Witnesses said he just blew up out of nowhere. All that was left were the magical items stuck in his body. Now the Magic Core team is checking those out. Strangely, even Twilight's own crew didn't see it coming, which lines up with something Lucy Diamond had hinted at earlier. Clearly, someone else was behind the scenes pulling his strings. Later on, Beryl made his way back to the forge to pick up a new weapon he'd ordered. It was forged using the remains of a powerful creature. Beryl thought it looked a bit over the top for an older guy like him, but Kearney told him it was perfect. She could sense how deadly it was without even touching it. It gave her chills. That was enough to convince Beryl to try it out soon. As they headed back to the training grounds, Beryl confessed that carrying a sword still made him uneasy. It was a feeling that never went away. On the way, they ran into Lucy, who asked to speak with him. That meant skipping the test run for his new weapon, but duty called, so he headed straight to Lucy Diamond's estate. At the front door, Beryl asked how things were going with Miwi. Lucy said she had encouraged the girl to join the Magic Institute. Inside, they were joined by a man named Roy Hellman, a priest from a place called Fen Yard, home of the Svi Church. Roy and Lucy explained that all the magical items found on Twilight were crafted there, specifically by Bishop Revios. The bishop had hired Twilight to collect bodies for him. Once Twilight was arrested, someone likely triggered a spell to erase him. No witnesses, no loose ends. The bishop had been storing bodies, chasing after what he called a miracle. According to the Svi Church, these miracles are basically just magic by another name. But the one miracle they obsess over is bringing the dead back to life. Most folks think it's just a myth, but Bishop Revelos is dead serious about it. Something needs to be done, but it's tricky. Revios is still inside the Sphere Church, right here in the northern part of the kingdom. The Order wants to question him tomorrow. If he runs back home, they'll never reach him. That's why they need to act fast and quietly. Starting a fight with the church could cause a massive political mess. And someone like Roy, just a regular priest, can't go up against a bishop. That's where Beryl comes in. Taking on this job could help him find the body of Miwi's sister too, giving her a chance to mourn properly. With that in mind, Beryl agreed to help. As he was leaving the mansion, he bumped into Miwi. She was carrying some things Lucy had asked her to grab. Beryl smiled, glad she was doing okay. He told her she'd changed a lot, for the better. That stuck with Miwi, who still didn't get why he was being so kind to her. Lucy told her that grown-ups often just want to help kids. Even then, Miwi couldn't wrap her head around it. After all, she once tried to steal from Beryl, and now both he and Lucy were giving her a place to stay? Seeing the confusion on her face, Beryl gently told her not to overthink it. He just wanted her to be safe, happy, and to know that no one here would ever hurt her. She didn't say much, but those words hit her hard. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe things were going to be okay. And even though she was still scared and unsure, she decided to keep going and give this new life a real chance. The long-awaited shipment had finally landed, and Revios wasted no time claiming it. Beryl, meanwhile, never looked away. He was watching the bishop like a hawk, staying hidden but ready for anything. Just as he rounded a quiet street corner, a hooded man appeared out of nowhere. When the stranger pulled back his hood, Beryl knew instantly this wasn't a coincidence. The man recognized him too, clearly not happy about Twilight's end. Beryl guessed he was one of Reveo's loyal fighters. He wasn't wrong. The guy didn't waste time either. He called for backup and slipped away, leaving behind 3 guards who weren't there to chat. Each of them tapped into some kind of divine power and charged at Beryl with superhuman speed and strength. For the first time in a long while, Beryl actually felt like his life was in real danger. No more watching. This was a fight. He dodged a wild swing, then responded with a clean strike across one soldier's gut. The blade sliced through like butter. That was all the confirmation he needed. This sword wasn't just fancy, it was deadly. But it wasn't over. 2 more came at him, and before long, even more arrived. Outnumbered, Beryl braced himself. Then a sudden blast of magic lit up the area, knocking the enemies back. It was Fazel, and behind her, Kearney, gripping her massive sword ready to brawl. They claimed they were just passing by, but Beryl had his doubts. didn't matter. They were fighting for him now, and they meant business. The two of them handled the attackers like seasoned warriors, cutting down enemies before they even had time to react. Even though new fighters kept arriving, the magic enhancements on the first group started to wear off. Confident, the girls told Beryl to keep moving. They'd cover him. With no time to argue, he slipped away and headed straight into the church. Inside, he came face to face with Bishop Revios and another man, the one in charge of the soldiers outside. Revios didn't run or hide. Instead, he gave the command to attack and started chanting, drawing on the same twisted power he worshipped. Then the shipment's contents were revealed. Bodies, dozens of corpses. And now, they were moving. One by one, they climbed out of the crates like something out of a nightmare. Beryl had seen a lot, but this was something else. What hit hardest was the face of one undead girl. Blue hair, familiar necklace. It was Mimi's sister. No mistaking it. As much as it hurt, there was no room for hesitation. He fought through them, cutting down the reanimated bodies, watching them vanish in flashes of eerie blue flame. Each kill chipped away at his resolve, but he didn't stop. Then she got close, Meli's sister. For a moment, he didn't swing. He hugged her, mourning her fate. After that, he gave her the same end. Quiet. Final. As she faded into ash, the necklace dropped to the floor. He picked it up, holding on to the only piece of her left and the crushing guilt that came with it. But there was no time to breathe. The knight, Spur, stepped forward. Cold, unshaken, he began praying, drawing strength from his god. And when he opened his eyes, he charged like a beast. His hits were brutal, each blow heavy enough to shake the ground. Beryl could barely keep up. This guy was on another level, fast, strong, relentless. Then it happened. Spur landed a hit. Blood. Beryl hadn't been injured like that in ages. It was a wake-up call. But even then, he refused to fall. He countered, slicing Spur's arm. The knight didn't flinch. Instead, he stabbed himself with a dagger, and his strength surged again, like the pain fueled him. Things only got worse from there. Beryl took hit after hit, bleeding and bruised, but never backing down. Even with the odds stacked and his body breaking, he stayed on his feet. Because for him, walking away was never an option. Spur charged in, swinging his sword straight at Beryl. The blade clipped his shoulder, drawing blood, but Beryl didn't hesitate. He moved fast and struck hard, slicing deep into Spur's forearm. Without missing a beat, he followed up with a heavy hit right across Spur's chest, knocking him off balance and halting his next attack. Blood poured from Spur's wounds, staining the floor. But instead of dropping, Spur jammed his sword into the ground to stay upright. Beryl could barely believe it. Anyone else would have already gone down. Then Spur pushed forward again, forcing his body to move even though it was clearly giving out. Blood gushed from his mouth now, and whatever strange power had been keeping him going started to fade. He looked like a wreck. But he kept coming like he had nothing to lose. In the end, his strength gave out. His sword slipped from his hand, and he collapsed in a heap. Beryl stood over him, thinking about everything Spur had done. The man talked about how someone like Beryl would never understand. And weirdly, Beryl kind of agreed. They were just built different. With the night finally out of the way, Beryl stepped outside and spotted his two old students. They were guarding Bishop Rez, who is now in chains. But the bishop didn't act like someone who had lost. He still talked big, claiming that none of this mattered, that without the church's power, the world was doomed. In his eyes, only the miracles born through suffering could save anything. Beryl wasn't buying it. The next day, Beryl went back to Lucy Diamond's place. She already knew how everything played out. He tried to express how sorry he was about Miwi and not being able to protect her better, but Lucy didn't let him dwell on it. She had something planned. She took him to a house, a new place, one she was giving to him. After all his time staying at inns since arriving in the capital, he finally had a place of his own. She opened the door, and inside, there was Meowie, casually sweeping the floor like she belonged there. Turns out, she had made a choice. She was finally going to school. But there was a catch. She needed a guardian to sign her in. Beryl could just sign the papers and call it a day, or he could go further. He could officially become her guardian, not just legally, but as her parent in every way that counted. Lucy dropped the suggestion and left it at that. She then told Meowie what Beryl had done for her the night before, that maybe, just maybe, there were still adults in the world who wouldn't give up on her. Hearing that, Meowie walked into the hallway, picked a room, and stepped inside like the decision had already been made. And that's when it hit Beryl. Without planning for it, without even realizing it, he had become a father. The smile on his face said it all. Whatever path he was on before, it had just changed, for good. The two of them settled into a snug little house he'd bought with hard-earned coin. Tiny garden out back, proper plumbing, even a real bathtub. 5 days later, he still felt like a fish out of water in the capital, but he pushed on. Sharing a roof with a teenage girl hadn't been part of the plan, especially one carrying a truckload of old hurts. He made breakfast, offered to do laundry, tried every friendly gesture he could think of. She kept her guard up, asking permission for the simplest things, like she was a guest instead of family. One sunny afternoon, they strolled the busy streets. Beryl had trained plenty of kids her age at the dojo, yet living with one was a totally different beast. Hoping to melt the ice, he grabbed her a sweet bean bun some buddies swore was amazing. In his head, it was walk, snack, and maybe chat. Later, he took her to a tiny puppet theater, something the farm life never allowed. They watched a tangled love story with wooden actors and sparkling magic effects. Beryl left starry-eyed. She scoffed at the hero's selfish moves, but admitted the show was fun. Next day, nothing seemed warmer between them. He still tagged along when she went to sign up at the Royal Arcane Academy. She clearly wanted to tackle the paperwork solo, but he hovered near the gate anyway. Students in the yard were spinning balls of water through the air like it was nothing. A friendly professor, Salune, came over and offered a tour. Beryl gawked at polished halls and glass windows, while Saloon explained that every kid here could end up the nation's top mage, so good manners came standard. When asked who sent them, Beryl casually dropped the name of High Commander Quartz. Saloon blinked twice, impressed but polite. Inside an office, Meowie learned she could skip the entrance exam thanks to a glowing letter of recommendation. She admitted fire tricks were her only skill. Saloon nudged her toward the combat track and outlined the 5 paths: combat, barrier, healing, boosting, and everyday magic. Dorm life or daily commute was her next big choice. So Chimera gave Meowie a full tour so she could decide if dorm life was for her. The moment she stepped inside, her eyes went wide. The place was huge and way fancier than she expected. The cafeteria served healthy meals 3 times a day, and the common areas were neat and bright. When they reached the bath area, Chimera mentioned it ran on a tight schedule, enough for a quick soak, not a long chill. Then they checked out one of the rooms. It was fully furnished and cozy enough to feel like home. On the way out, Beryl brought up grabbing lunch in the Central District before heading back. He really hoped she'd consider staying there. A place like that could help her grow, even if he had his doubts, like whether she'd get along with the others. Maybe she'd feel out of place. Or maybe it was just him she kept walls up around, and she'd relax more with kids her age. They reached a small diner, but it was jam-packed. As they were about to leave, Sheena suddenly appeared and offered them a seat at her table. Beryl, a bit surprised, thanked her, especially for the sword she gifted him recently. She brushed it off like it was no big deal. After a sip from her drink, she glanced at Meowie and raised an eyebrow, curious about who the girl was. Beryl hesitated before explaining how she'd ended up under his care and was now staying with him. That seemed to catch Shayna off guard. She nearly spat out her drink but quickly pulled herself together and apologized for reacting so suddenly. Once the food came, the conversation shifted to work. Shayna mentioned that monster hunting jobs had increased lately. Beryl figured maybe new creatures were showing up, but she said it had more to do with a big political event coming up. Some foreign leaders were visiting, and they wanted the city looking safe and under control. Beryl hadn't expected adventurers to be tied to that kind of stuff, but apparently even they had to play their part sometimes. After the meal, Beryl asked Miwi to head home on her own since he had business at the guild headquarters. Before she left, he asked Shayna to give the girl some advice about the academy. Shayna, being her blunt self, made it clear, the school only takes top talent, and it's going to be a rough ride. If she had Beryl as a mentor, she'd better not even think about quitting. Muley nodded, saying the old guy was strong. That rubbed Sheena the wrong way. She didn't like how casually the girl referred to her former teacher. Things got a bit tense, but Beryl stepped in before it went too far. Sheena calmed down and admitted she might have gone overboard. Truth was, she really respected Beryl, and that made her protective of how people talked about him. In the end, Miwi seemed to take the advice seriously. She thanked Shayna and left. Beryl felt like something shifted. Just a little. Maybe she was starting to open up. Shayna even admitted the girl had something special. Sure, she wasn't polite in the usual way, but she was real. And that kind of honesty, it could take her far. Beryl agreed. That's why he wanted her to have the right space to grow. He just wasn't sure what that space was yet. Later at the training hall, he brought the whole situation up with the guild commander. Should Miwi keep living with him or move into the dorms? The commander looked stunned for a second when she realized the girl was staying under the same roof as her old instructor. Just then, Connie popped in, completely uninvited, and jumped straight into the debate. To her, the answer was obvious: dorm life all the way. Living at the academy meant less travel, more safety, and free food. Beryl had to admit she had a point. Just like Faisal said, living in the dorms is a big help. Even though Beryl gets the practical side of it, he's still unsure. He's worried Miwi might feel out of place or not click with the other students. Then, Hen Blitz joins the chat, saying sometimes the best way to grow is to dive into new stuff, even if it's uncomfortable. Alicia agrees. It's better for Miwi in the long run. Still unsure, Beryl decides to ask Lucy Diamond what she thinks. She doesn't even hesitate. She says the dorms are a smart choice. While they're chatting, Feist shows up with a delivery, and Lucy casually brings up her own time at the Magic Institute. She used to live in the dorms too. Super convenient, she says, so why not? Face hears that Miwi is joining the institute soon, and mentions she might even end up teaching her. For some weird reason, that makes Beryl uneasy. He cuts the conversation short and leaves without much of a goodbye. Face wonders what his deal is, but Lucy just shrugs and says he's probably overthinking things. Walking home, Beryl reflects on it all. He always hoped he could be like a dad to Miwi, someone she could rely on. When she once claimed a room in his house like it was hers, it made him feel proud. But the truth is, she was clearly impressed with the dorms. And if he really cared about her, he had to let her make her own choices, even if that meant stepping back. Later that evening, Beryl gets home with some groceries, and Miwi asks him to check a weird noise coming from the bottom of a dresser. He shifts the drawer, and surprise, there's a hole in the wall. Before he can even react, 3 rats shoot out like they own the place. Immediately, Beryl throws open all the windows and doors. He grabs a broom and gets into battle mode, like he's facing some ancient beast instead of a few rodents. Miwi tells him to calm down, but he's dead serious. Rat bites are no joke. His first few swings totally miss. The rats are way too quick. Miwi says she's used to this kind of thing back when she lived in a rougher part of town. That hits Beryl hard. In that moment, he promises to himself that she'll never have to deal with stuff like that again. One rat bolts out the door, but the other 2 keep running circles around him like they're mocking him. He tosses aside the broom and grabs his jacket, planning to trap them with it. But attempt after attempt fails. Finally, after too many misses, he loses it. He throws the entire table across the room with a roar, managing to pin one rat under it. Pure rage, pure chaos. With a bit of improvising, he wraps the rat in his jacket like it's some kind of prize catch. But the last one? That one's a sneaky little devil. It darts into the bathroom and jumps into the tub, like it's ready for round 2. With one last pest still loose, Beryl focused hard, ready to catch it himself. He reached out, trying to grab the little creature barehanded, but rats aren't exactly easy targets. But then, out of nowhere, a sudden flash of light appeared near the rat's path, making it flinch and turn back, right into Beryl's grip. Mui had silently stepped in and used a bit of her magic to help. She didn't say anything afterward, just left the room quietly like it was no big deal. The rat, not willing to go down without a fight, bit Beryl's hand in protest. Annoyed but not defeated, Beryl flung it straight out the window. That evening, Beryl came back with a strong-smelling pest repellent he'd gotten from a bar nearby. He set it near the hole the rats had come through and pushed the dresser back in place. Then he told Mui he was going to cook and that she could relax and read while he worked. As the kitchen filled with the smell of boiling stew, Beryl felt something he hadn't in a while. Calm, maybe even content. Mui had trusted him enough to ask for help earlier, and when things got wild, she stepped up without being asked. It gave him hope. Maybe she'd be okay no matter where she ended up. When she wandered into the kitchen a bit later, he thought she was just hungry and offered her some bread, but instead she came in ready to help cook. He handed her a few veggies to peel, grateful for the company. Still, deep down, it stung a little. Just when they were starting to understand each other, she'd be moving out soon. Maybe she'd go back to her hometown for the holidays or visit someone she missed. He didn't ask, but the thought sat heavy. Dinner was simple but nice, and they sat together to eat. He joked that it got done faster thanks to her, and she admitted she'd been thinking of learning how to cook better. He told her there was plenty of time to learn, no rush. But she seemed serious, saying she wanted to start now. He found that odd since the dorms served meals anyway, but then she told him something unexpected. She had decided not to move into the dorm after all. She wanted to stay right here. It caught Beryl off guard. He tried to explain she might have more fun in the dorms, make more friends, but she'd already made her decision. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone cared about her, and now that she had a safe place, she wanted to return the kindness. All she needed was to be told how she could help. Her words hit Beryl hard in the best way possible. He didn't know what to say. He chuckled awkwardly and said the house would probably fall apart without her keeping things in check, especially with the rat situation. That finally pulled a small smile from him. She told him he always asked what she wanted to eat, but really, all she ever wanted was something warm. That nearly broke him. So he stood up and declared there'd be hot meals every day. Soup, stews, whatever she wanted. Of course, Mui shot him a look and told him to wipe that weird smile off his face before she changed her mind and actually moved out. The next day during training, Alicia had something on her mind. She went straight to the instructor, looking serious, like she had big news that might shake things up. Some of the other students threw nervous glances her way, expecting maybe a crisis or emergency. But nope, turns out it was something way more ordinary. They needed to update their wardrobes. Apparently, a group of high-profile visitors from a far-off place called Virelia was coming to Baltrion. Alicia wanted everyone, especially the instructor, to look the part. Beryl chimed in casually, saying he'd already heard the news from Sheena, which didn't sit well with Alicia. The rivalry between those two was unspoken but very real, especially when it came to getting the instructor's attention. Trying to stay cool, Alicia mentioned that their squad was put in charge of security for the visiting delegation. When Beryl asked if the high circle from the church was coming too, Henblitz cleared it up. Nah, the visiting group was all diplomats and nobles, no religious leaders this time. Politics stuff handled by the Royal Council. Alicia then added that she was planning something extra, a meeting between Beryl and the visiting royals. Keone and Hamlet thought it sounded like a huge opportunity to raise the instructor's profile. He wasn't as excited. As usual, he wasn't into the whole attention thing. But Alicia reminded him, politely but firmly, that being an instructor under royal appointment meant he couldn't exactly skip these formalities. So he agreed. Since he had nothing decent to wear, they landed on the topic of clothes shopping. He admitted he didn't know the city's fashion scene, which was the perfect opening for Alicia to offer to take him to one of the best tailors in town. With no real way out, Beryl went along with it. After she left, a couple of students couldn't help but wonder if she had more than just shopping in mind. That evening, Beryl got home and found a package waiting. Inside, a bunch of fancy women's clothes and a note without a name. He thought maybe it was from a priest he knew, but even Mui, his young roommate, said it didn't look like something that priest would send. Her dad just laughed it off, telling her to take a peek. There was enough fabric in there to start a fashion show. Later at dinner, Beryl told Mui he had to look presentable for the upcoming event and that Alicia would be taking him around the city to shop the next day. He invited Mui to tag along, but she shut it down instantly. He joked a little, saying it might be fun, but she turned him down again, this time with a strange tone in her voice. He was left scratching his head, wondering what just happened. Understanding young girls, not exactly his strong point. The next afternoon, Alicia met him outside, this time not in armor but dressed casually. She looked different, more relaxed, and it caught Beryl off guard. The two of them headed off toward the tailor shop, while Henblitz and Kuruni followed from afar, clearly trying not to get caught. At the shop, Beryl took a moment to soak in the upscale vibe of the central district. Everything smelled expensive. The air even felt fancier. He liked it, but also felt like he didn't belong. Alicia reassured him, trying to boost his confidence. Inside the shop, the tailor greeted Alicia with warmth, like she was a regular. Beryl, on the other hand, looked totally lost, eyes wide like a kid seeing a candy store for the first time. Shelves of clothes surrounded him, and he had no idea where to begin. He let Alicia take the lead, but that might have been a mistake. She picked out something flashy, a doublet that looked more like stage costume than formal wear. The shopkeeper hyped it up, but Beryl wasn't having it. He politely pushed back, clearly not feeling it. That's when he realized he might need to take matters into his own hands. If not, he'd walk out dressed like a festival tent. He pointed to a plain brown outfit, simple but solid. Alicia didn't love it, thought it was boring, but he stood his ground. She gave in and asked the tailor to hold it while they checked out other stores. As they stepped out, their two sneaky followers stayed on their trail. Alicia asked Beryl to grab lunch, and when he said yes, her whole mood lit up. That's when the spying students started to really believe, yep, something more than just shopping might be happening here. Citrus drags Beryl to this super high-end restaurant. It's the kind of place that's all quiet and classy, where the napkins are folded fancy and the food looks like it should be in an art gallery. Beryl's clearly out of his comfort zone. There's no way he'd ever walk into a place like this on his own. When the food shows up, it's so well plated, it almost feels wrong to touch it. But Citrus is sitting there looking smug, feeling like she's just pulled off a secret mission, turning what's basically a date into something casual. Back at the academy, Kuruni is hiding behind a giant vase, giggling like a kid who just saw something juicy. Heinblitz and Kinney are nearby, totally amused. None of them have seen the commander that cheerful before. Kinney even jokes that if Citrus and Beryl are on a date, then maybe they are too. Kuruni, of course, panics and insists that no, their situation is not the same. Later that day, after visiting a dozen shops, Beryl ends up buying the first outfit he tried on. Typical. As they walk back, Citrus remembers a time long ago when she got into trouble trying to fetch something dumb from another dojo. The professor took the blame, even though it wasn't his fault. She'd cried a lot that day, and he tried to cheer her up with food. They never ate anything back then, but today kind of felt like they finally finished that old story. As they part ways, neither says much. Heinblitz watches from a distance and notices the commander, keeps her eyes on Beryl as he walks off. Then he casually tells her he'd been spying on her the whole time. She doesn't even flinch. She just shrugs it off, saying there's nothing she's hiding. So Heinblitz, curious, asks what the instructor really means to her. Next morning during training, Kuruni apologizes for vanishing the day before. When Heinblitz blurted everything out, he tells her not to worry. He left her name out of it. Then Citrus walks into the hall, all serious, and Kuruni freaks out again, making some excuse about needing to train her footwork. Citrus says she's here to challenge the instructor to a duel. Everyone is shocked, but she explains it's about making him look strong in front of the royal visitors. Even if he loses, just fighting her would raise his standing. Heinblitz asks if that's the only reason. Citrus admits there's something else. If she wins, she's planning to make a special request to the instructor. After she leaves, Kiruni rushes back, hungry for gossip. When she hears that last part, she jumps to conclusions, thinking the commander's definitely about to confess her love. Heinblitz says it wouldn't be surprising. She's smart, skilled, kind, and stunning. What guy wouldn't fall for her? Then Beryl walks in, as chill as ever. Citrus doesn't waste time. She throws down the challenge. He shrugs and agrees. The students gather to watch, with Heinblitz and Drought acting as refs. Beryl grabs his usual wooden sword and gets ready. It's been ages since they last sparred, and now she's a top-ranking fighter. He knows she might wipe the floor with him, but hey, it's still good practice. As the fight begins, Citrus shows exactly why she's called Lightning. Her opening strike is a blur, fast and clean, but Beryl blocks it. She keeps pressing, attacking with sharp precision, and Beryl's barely hanging on. After deflecting 3 blows, he manages to push her back a little. Citrus admits nobody's blocked that many of her attacks before. Still, Beryl's sweating. Her moves are wild, fast, and completely unpredictable. He knows he can't play defense forever, so he tries to go on the offensive. Bad idea. Citrus goes into full beast mode and tags his leg. Still, Beryl's not giving up. He figures losing might only make Citrus push herself harder. After a few more clashes, she knocks him off balance, but doesn't finish it. Instead, she grins, like she's just happy to show him what she's learned. Heinblitz mutters that Beryl's getting cornered fast. Kiruni just wants Citrus to win, so she'll finally say what's on her heart. But deep down, she wonders if maybe Citrus is fine just staying where they are. Somewhere between student and something more. Beryl's brain is going a mile a minute trying to figure her out. Suddenly, it clicks. It's not just speed. It's the way she shifts her weight with her knees. That's what's throwing him off. Even when she misses, she dodges counters like a pro. It's like she's reading his mind. Then she finds an opening and goes in for the win. But Beryl grabs her cape and pulls her down, scoring a hit of his own. Kiruni gasps, wondering if that's even legal. Drow just laughs, saying in a real battle, anything goes, and only Beryl would be bold enough to pull something like that on the commander. Citrus calls the match and names him the winner. She compliments his skills, but reminds him that not all fights are fair, and he better not forget that. As the lunch bell rings, Beryl heads off like nothing happened. Kinney and Heinblitz walk over to Citrus. Kiruni says she'll never reach Citrus's level, then nervously asks what her big wish was if she... Citrus smirks and says she just wanted him to buy her new clothes. Since he bought something for himself, she figured it was only fair. Kirani is floored. That's what all the buildup was for? She thought Citrus was going to spill her feelings. Embarrassed, she ducks out again. Heinblitz doesn't buy it. He asks if Citrus really has no plans to confess to Beryl. She simply says she just wants her teacher to be happy. Even better if she could be part of the reason why. Heinblitz laughs, admitting he wasn't even sure who he was rooting for during the fight. Citrus agrees it was a weird feeling. That evening, over dinner, Beryl tells Mui he was almost wrecked earlier, but somehow pulled off a win. He admits Citrus has become seriously strong. Mui grins, guessing that Citrus probably wants the teacher all to herself. She's the one dragging him out shopping and now challenging him to duels. Mui jokes she's clearly got a thing for him. Beryl immediately shuts that down, saying there's an age gap and she's his student. But Mui rolls her eyes and says he's being dramatic. To her, ignoring the whole thing would be even dumber. As dinner time rolls around, Beryl asks Mui what the school gave her when she went today. She pulls out her uniform and some textbooks from her bag. They're all on loan and must be returned at the end of the term, so she's being extra careful not to lose or damage anything. Suddenly, Beryl remembers something he noticed about the students at the Magic Academy. He asks Mui if they gave her a backpack. She says no, but assures him it's fine, her current bag will do. Beryl disagrees, telling her that bag isn't suitable for school and insists on getting her a proper backpack. The next day, Sharina visits the guild to speak with Nidos. She's been given a special request. The guild explains that a group of platinum-ranked adventurers tracked a certain target into the forest near the capital, but haven't taken further action. That's why they're asking for her help now. Although Sharina isn't convinced she'll be much use, they still urge her to go. Just then, someone notifies her that she has visitors, something that piques her interest. Meanwhile, Beryl goes to a store that sells backpacks and tells the shopkeeper he's looking for one for school. The shopkeeper guesses that if he's shopping this time of year, his child must have just enrolled in the Magic Institute and assumes he can overcharge him. Once Beryl confirms that, the shopkeeper shows him the best options. Beryl picks the one that looks most suitable, and the man tells him it costs 95,000 docs. At first, Beryl stays calm, until he realizes the guy said 1,000 at the end. The shopkeeper explains it's made of high-quality leather, but if it's out of budget, they have cheaper ones too. Beryl checks the cheaper ones, but like always, once you've seen the expensive stuff, everything else looks terrible. The difference in quality is obvious. Trying to convince him, the shopkeeper says it's a backpack she'll use every day for years, so it's worth investing in. Beryl still can't decide, so he steps outside for some air. He thinks to himself that while he could buy that backpack with his current income, there's no guarantee things will stay the same financially. That's when he realizes he needs a better income if he's going to support Mui properly in the future. So, he decides to stop wasting money and be more responsible. On his walk, he runs into Serena and notices she seems a bit down. He asks what's wrong. She says she was asked to take on a pretty difficult job and is trying to figure out how to go about it. She admits it might be selfish to ask, but she thinks she'll have a better shot at succeeding if he helps her. Beryl, curious, says he might be useful, especially when she mentions the pay is good. Now he's interested and asks for more details. Later, they head out on the mission, capturing a live horse. Not just any horse, a high-quality one meant to be gifted to the royal family of Svirnir-Vanya. Hearing this, Beryl assumes the royal family of Iberium is behind the request, and Serena confirms it. She also admits that she asked him along specifically to make sure the mission succeeds. Beryl says this is great timing since his expenses have been piling up and he was already looking for side work. Sharuna calls it a coincidence. Another person had come looking for a job just the day before. When they arrive, the Platinum adventurers tell them that even though they've set several traps, the horse hasn't fallen for any. With that, Sharuna hands Beryl some tools and they head into the forest together. Along the way, she explains that they're searching for a very specific horse, white fur and a silver mane. Beryl replies that while he's hunted monsters and animals that destroyed the fields back in his village, he's never captured one alive before. Serena clarifies that not only does the horse need to be alive, it also has to be unharmed without a single scratch, which makes the mission a lot harder. Even experienced horse traders have hired adventurers before and failed. She admits she wasn't very confident at first, but now that Viral is with her, she actually believes it might be possible. In fact, with him by her side, a lot of things suddenly seem possible. Eventually, they find horse tracks near a river. Checking the map, they decide the best course is to head to the nearest spring, since horses need to drink a lot of water. While walking, Serona asks how things are going living with Mui. Viral says things are better than before, but it's still not easy, especially because of her age. Serona reminds him that he's worked with teenagers before at the dojo, but Viral points out that living with someone and being a role model is a whole different challenge. Tarina tells Beryl that being a father figure and just living in the same house are two completely different things. Still, she brings up her own experience, how she lived at his place and was treated like family. Beryl points out that things were different back then. She was younger and his parents were still around. He assumes that's how he views it now too. But Sharina thinks Mui has her own strengths and she believes everything will turn out fine. When they finally reach the spring, Sharina explains the plan. The moment they spot the horse, she'll shoot a padded arrow at it. Since horses fear being attacked from behind, it'll spook and run forward. That's when Beryl needs to throw the net and pin it down. She shows him the arrows, wrapped in cloth so they won't hurt the animal. They get into position, camouflaged in the grass. Soon enough, the white horse with a silver mane comes into view, walking slowly toward the water. As Beryl gives her the signal, Saruna suddenly rises and fires the arrow. The horse bolts forward just as planned, but when Beryl moves in to catch it, the horse surprises him with a massive leap straight over him. Without hesitating, Serena dashes after it, yelling for Beryl to take an alternate route and try to cut it off. He rushes through the forest, anticipating the horse's path. When they cross again, Serena shoots another arrow to slow it down, giving Beryl the perfect chance to throw the net. But again, the horse swerves to the side and avoids it, then charges straight at Beryl at full speed. Beryl focuses, times it just right, and leaps onto the horse, grabbing it around the neck. Serena cheers him on, but after a few seconds, Beryl's grip starts slipping. He tries to climb on its back, but he loses hold and falls off. Serena isn't ready to give up and tells him to keep going. Now the horse is running along a narrow path on the edge of a cliff, with a river below. Serena tells Beryl she's going to get ahead and redirect it back toward him. She sprints through the forest, reaching a spot in front of the horse, and pulls out her blades. Just flashing them is enough to make the horse panic and turn around. Beryl braces himself to catch it, but unexpectedly, the horse makes another huge leap, this time onto a rocky ledge separated from the path. Because of the force of its landing, the ledge begins to crumble under its weight. Acting on instinct, Beryl jumps after it to stop it from falling into the river below. The ledge collapses, turning into a pile of rocks trapped between the riverbanks. Beryl and the horse are now stranded together in that tight, rocky space. The horse reacts aggressively at first, but Beryl raises his hand and calmly tells it he's not going to hurt it. To his surprise, the horse stops and relaxes. Now stuck there together, Beryl starts thinking, there's no way up, and if they try to cross the river, the current will drag them under. Determined to avoid starvation, Beryl comes up with a plan. After taking a deep breath, he draws his sword and slices down a nearby tree, making it fall across the gap like a bridge. Carefully, he begins crossing it with the horse. But halfway through, he slips. Luckily, the horse grabs him by the hood with its teeth, saving him from falling. Beryl thanks the horse and praises it for being kind when it wants to be. Once they make it across, Serena rushes toward them, completely exhausted. She tells Beryl she had to circle all the way around the river to get there. Beryl, amazed, realizes she's even faster than a horse. Serena mentions that the path she had to take was really long, but she's happy to see Beryl safe and sound. She also admires the fact that he managed to tame the horse, especially now that it's showing affection and not resisting at all. Later, they return to the city. Nidus tells Beryl that, once again, he saved the guild's reputation. After all, royal requests are crucial for their status. After that, Serena hands him the reward for completing the mission and sincerely thanks him for his support. Changing the subject, she confesses that she used to be jealous of Miwi, but now she actually wants to cheer her on. She admits that Miwi is genuine and considerate. Beryl, confused, doesn't understand why she's suddenly bringing up Miwi. Still not fully grasping what Serena means, he hears her say something cryptic, that maybe something good awaits him today. When he gets home, Beryl still doesn't get her message, but then he remembers something and quickly heads off. Once home, he surprises Miwi by showing her a brand new backpack, which leaves her completely impressed. She tells him she didn't really need one, but it's beautiful. Since he insists, she tries it on to show how it looks. Beryl tells her it suits her perfectly and hopes she'll put it to good use. She smiles and thanks him. Then she gives him something in return, a ceramic mug she bought just for him, since he accidentally broke his wooden one. She makes sure to clarify that she didn't steal it. She actually worked to earn the money and buy it herself. That reminder hits Beryl. He recalls what Serena told him earlier, that someone had come to her asking for work. Right on cue, Miwi explains that Serena helped her find a dishwashing job, and that's how she was able to afford the gift. Beryl starts to understand everything. He asks why she went through all that trouble, and she simply says his old mug was broken. And now, she wants him to try the new one. He takes a big gulp of beer from it and admits it even tastes better. Miwi tells him she heard ceramic cups are supposed to be better anyway. She noticed he always seemed to enjoy his drinks, but with this cup, it might feel even more special. Then she adds that once she starts school, she won't be able to help much around the house, so he'll have to handle more chores. But if he has a nice mug to relax with at the end of the day, maybe that'll make it all a bit more rewarding. Beryl is deeply touched by her gesture, so much so that he nearly bursts into tears as he downs another drink to show his happiness. Miwi quickly tells him not to cry. The next day is Miwi's first day of school. It's a big moment, and Beryl insists on walking her there. She grumbles a bit, but agrees to let him come along. Eventually, the car shows up to take her to the academy, and she heads off. Beryl goes off to work, and when he arrives, Karuni mentions he seems especially cheerful today. Beryl confirms that, yeah, today feels like a memorable one. Their conversation gets interrupted when Luha shows up. She tells them that the commander and vice commander of the Royal Church Order of Esfezna have just arrived at the base. Before the official delegation shows up, they want to meet their counterparts here. So she and Draught are heading over, and if Beryl wants to join, he's welcome. Beryl thinks it over. He's unsure how the Order of Esfezna dealt with the issue involving Bishop Rebios, so he suspects they might be hiding something. With that in mind, he decides it's best to check things out for himself and agrees to join them. Later, they meet the higher-ups, and Beryl is shocked to recognize the vice commander. She's another one of his former students. Her name is Rosmar Bleehard, and she's genuinely happy to see him again. Lucia, however, gets furious at how sweetly Rose treats Beryl, creating a slightly awkward atmosphere for everyone. Alusha wasn't too happy seeing how close the girl got to the man. Her irritation was hard to miss. Sensing the tension, Rose tried to smooth things over by explaining that she used to train under a well-known swordmaster named Beryl. He remembered her too. She didn't stay long at his dojo, but during her time there, she definitely stood out thanks to her impressive skills. She was thankful for what he taught her, though the way she showed her appreciation was a little too enthusiastic, making Alusha feel jealous. Trying to move past the weird vibe, everyone finally sat down and chatted more calmly. Beryl was still in disbelief that Rose had risen so high in the ranks and was now vice commander of the Holy Order. Rose seemed happy they met again and gave credit to fate for the reunion. Her travel partner commented on how wild it was that both Rose and Citrus had the same teacher. Then, Alusha brought up the previous vice commander, and the answer was vague at best. Clearly, there was more to that story. Henblitz asked whether their visitor, Master Gatoga, had come just for friendly chit-chat. Turns out, Rose had come to get familiar with Baltrain and was planning to stay a few days. Alicia offered to show them around, but Gatoga declined. Rose didn't hide her disappointment. She'd hoped her old teacher would be the one to guide her. Beryl, trying not to die from secondhand embarrassment, gave a tight smile and went along with things. Later that day, after wrapping up his training duties, Beryl headed out, thinking about picking up his new outfit. On the way, he ran into Rose again, this time without her usual armor. She didn't waste a second, clearly wanting to spend time with her old master and maybe get a personal tour of the city. With no real way out of it, Beryl showed her around Baltrain. During their walk, he asked about her time since leaving the dojo. She told him how she was pulled into the Holy Order not long after leaving, persuaded by the commander to use her talent for something bigger. Funny thing is, she never planned for any of this. She once dreamed of traveling the world, living carefree, but life had other ideas. Beryl could relate. His own teaching job came out of nowhere too. As they strolled, Rose fondly recalled her training days, saying those were some of her best memories. Beryl pointed out that being vice commander was a big deal, but she didn't think it was anything special. Maybe just being in the right place at the right time. When she saw some kids playing nearby, she got a little nostalgic and admitted it all felt sudden. Wanting to shift gears, Rose brought up how she missed a couple of folks from her past, though she liked the city and could imagine living there. Beryl asked what that meant for her current position, but Rose didn't seem too concerned. Then, without any hesitation, she jokingly suggested crashing at Beryl's place if she ever moved to Baltrain. That made Beryl think she'd probably get along great with the younger crowd, especially someone like Neely. Still, he wasn't having it, and Rose let it go. With that, she said her goodbye and left. Beryl continued on to pick up his new outfit, but once he put it on, he instantly regretted spending so much on it. It looked ridiculous and felt worse. It was the most he'd ever spent on anything, and now he just felt like a fool in expensive clothes. That afternoon, when he got back home, Beryl decided to surprise Mui with his fancy new look. He was dressed sharp, looking more polished than usual. But instead of being impressed, Mui just turned away, completely unimpressed. Not the reaction he was aiming for. But he's used to her being tough to read. Without saying much, she mentioned that dinner was ready. Beryl changed back into his regular clothes before sitting down to eat. As they ate, Mui mumbled something under her breath, like she preferred how he usually looked. Beryl caught a bit of it, but she didn't say it again. He let it slide and focused on dinner, complimenting her cooking. She had definitely gotten better in the kitchen. Curious, he asked how school had been going. She told him her classmates kept dragging her all over the place lately. First the art room, then the music hall, and today it was the library. It wasn't that she hated it, but she clearly felt overwhelmed. The school was enormous, and she was getting tired of being shuffled around. And on top of that, the books in the library were insanely complex, full of terms she couldn't even pronounce. Beryl remembered how tough the school paperwork had been for her and offered to help with anything she didn't understand. The next morning, a big announcement went out. A prince from a foreign kingdom would be spending a few days in their city. He'd be checking out the capital alongside the third princess, and the knights had one job: keep them safe. Beryl was picked as part of the team, along with a few of the most reliable members. Everything was running smoothly when the royal family arrived. The princess got a warm welcome, and plenty of people had good things to say. Alusha herself had apparently spoken up about Beryl's skills, which made him stand out even more. Soon after, the prince showed up with Rose and Gitoga, and it didn't take long to see how close he and the princess were. They acted less like political figures and more like a couple, always smiling and sticking close. Meanwhile, Rose kept tossing glances at Beryl, clearly wanting him to notice her, but Beryl stayed professional, keeping his head in the game. After a bit, a fancy carriage rolled up to take the prince and princess on their city tour. As they stepped in, Alusha gave Beryl a quiet signal. That was his cue. The real plan was kicking off. Beryl hopped into a different ride, knowing full well he was just there to draw attention away from the real targets. As they cruised through the streets, Rose asked if she could join him, but he reminded her to stay on task. The escort continued, and Beryl noticed how tightly guarded everything was. Soldiers on nearly every corner, traffic controlled down to the minute. Then, out of nowhere, the whole trip hit pause. The royal couple spotted something shiny in a shop window and decided they wanted a closer look. No one dared argue, so everything stopped while they checked it out. The prince went all in with compliments when the princess tried it on. A crowd quickly gathered outside the store, and Beryl was surprised by how fast people showed up to see them. When the royals came out, they were met with cheers like celebrities. Before they got back into the carriage, Gitoga reminded the prince that random stops like this weren't great for security. The prince casually promised to behave, though it didn't sound very convincing. In the middle of all the noise, something caught Beryl's eye. A strange figure in the crowd. He tried to get a clear look, but whoever it was had already disappeared. After checking the area and finding nothing, he let it go. Maybe it was just in his head. The tour resumed, and soon the group arrived at the palace where a fancy meal was waiting. While everyone was eating, Beryl decided to mention the weird feeling he'd had earlier. He told them it felt like someone was watching them with bad intentions, just for a second, but enough to leave him uneasy. Hemblitz didn't take it lightly and immediately went to tighten security. Later that day, the prince and princess stepped out into the palace courtyard to wave at the crowd. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, 3 masked figures in cloaks rushed past the guards, heading straight for the royals. Gitoga reacted instantly, drawing his weapon, followed by the rest of the elite guard. Rose grabbed her shield and charged toward one of them. Beryl, watching the scene, picked up on something strange. These attackers didn't move like pros. Before he could think more, 3 more people dropped from a nearby rooftop, throwing down smoke bombs that filled the area with thick fog. Alusha wasted no time, signaling for the royals to be taken inside, while the smoke made it almost impossible to see anything. One of the masked attackers came at Geraint with a knife. He blocked it just in time and realized the blade was coated in something toxic. Gatoga landed a strong hit on his opponent, but it wasn't enough to take them down. The whole place broke into chaos. Hamlet got a handful of sand in the eyes and stumbled back. Beryl, who usually keeps his cool, found himself on the edge. He blocked a hard kick, but it still knocked him off balance. He knew then this was serious. No more holding back. He went all in, delivered a sharp elbow strike to the enemy's face, and took them out quickly once they were disarmed. Stroud, seeing nothing in the smoke, shut his eyes and used his senses to feel movement. He sensed someone approaching from the right, blocked just in time and stayed calm despite how fast the enemy was. When the moment was right, he spun and delivered a clean, powerful hit that dropped the attacker. Commander Citrus was deep in her own fight. Her opponent tried dirty tricks like grabbing her cape to throw her off, but she stayed quick, dodged a stab, and countered with a spinning move. She landed a hit on her enemy's leg and followed up with shallow cuts that left him unable to fight back. She didn't finish him off. They needed someone to talk. Meanwhile, Gatoga slammed his opponent into a pillar and tore off the mask, but when he saw the attacker's face, he froze. Just long enough to take a hit to the leg and let the enemy escape into the crowd. Rose, on the other hand, knocked her enemy down with her shield, disarmed him, and didn't waste any time. She ended the fight with one clean strike. As the smoke cleared, Beryl was stunned to see her blade lodged in the attacker's head. He always thought she fought defensively, but clearly that had changed. Henblitz and the remaining guards captured the last of the enemies, but before they could question anyone, the prisoners bit down on something hidden in their mouths. Blood started pouring out, and in seconds they were gone. Any chance of getting answers died with them. Things went south pretty fast after the royal outing began. Everything was suddenly shut down, and the whole crew shifted gears. Their one and only goal? Get the prince and princess out of there and back to the castle before anything worse happened. Alucia stayed calm and handed over local control to Henblitz, but she wasn't taking any chances. She asked Beryl to stay close and make sure nothing happened on the way back. The carriages started moving, everyone tense, scanning for any signs of more trouble. Beryl had questions, but honestly, Alucia didn't have many answers. They'd already taken down a few of the attackers, but none were left to talk. They either vanished or took themselves out before being caught. No leads, no trail. With all this chaos, tomorrow's public event probably wasn't going to happen. Eventually, the royals made it back safely. That was a relief, at least for now. Still, it was clear the palace needed to upgrade its defenses, fast. There was no guarantee that this was a one-time thing. After settling the situation, Alucia and Gaga had to file their reports. Beryl was told to take the rest of the day off, and so was Rose. Beryl figured Rose might drag him into another walk around the city like she sometimes did, but this time, she just left without saying a word. That caught him off guard. Left with nothing to do, Beryl headed back home. He thought he'd find Mui chilling there, like always, but instead, Lucy was already waiting. That wasn't something he expected. She had come to speak with him, directly, in person. What happened today shook a lot of people, and she didn't want to leave anything unclear. Beryl mentioned something that had been bugging him. There weren't any mages present during the tour security. That seemed off. Lucy agreed. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. The magic division had been told to stay out of sight this time. Lucy quickly picked up that this was the kind of conversation that could turn serious and political, so she excused herself and left them alone. Lucy appreciated the space and got straight to the point. The reason the magic unit stayed hidden was tied to cultural sensitivity. In some regions, magic isn't just a tool, it's sacred. Letting people use it openly might have stirred up controversy or offended the guests. So, the decision was to avoid that risk altogether. But Lucy believed there was more to the attack. To her, it didn't feel random. It felt planned, a statement. And she had reason to think the attackers were connected to Steen, a place currently torn between two major power groups, the Religious Order and the Royal Loyalists. Meanwhile, back near the training grounds, Rose went looking for Alucia. Even though she had been dismissed earlier, she had one more thing to check. She wanted to talk to Gattaca, but he was still in meetings. That meant no final decision had been made about canceling the next day's tour. Alusha had offered ideas to tighten security, but the final word was up to the higher-ups. Rose asked about the next day's route, which passed through a farming area. Alusha was curious why she wanted to know, and Rose just said she wanted to understand the layout better. She didn't want to wait around for the meeting to end either. Instead, she suggested they talk it over at a nearby cafe. Back at Beryl's place, the conversation with Lucy continued. He asked her straight up, why Steen? Lucy explained that she had reliable sources through her network, and based on what she learned, Steen's internal conflict was getting ugly. That kind of chaos made it a perfect breeding ground for politically motivated attack. Beryl didn't really sign up for this kind of mess. He's a fighter, not some guy who deals in politics. Especially not the kind that involves foreign power struggles. But now that he's kind of in the middle of it, he turns to Lucy for answers. He asks her straight up, who's really in charge over in Steen? The Pope or the King? Lucy looks surprised. To her, this stuff is basic knowledge, but then again, Beryl has never cared much about political stuff, so she breaks it down for him. In Steen, the king is technically the top authority, but since he follows the church's rules, he can't just ignore what the Pope says. Still, if there's a tie or a disagreement, the king's word wins out. That said, today's attack? Lucy thinks it was the Pope's loyalists making a move to shift the balance in their favor. Beryl doesn't quite get it though. Why go after Prince Glenn? Wouldn't someone else just take his place? But Lucy points out something important. Glenn's brother Fall is super devoted to the church. If he takes the throne, he might just hand over all the power to the Pope, no questions asked. Meanwhile, somewhere else in town, Alusha is wrapping up a walkthrough of the route for tomorrow's royal tour. She's ready to head out when Rose brings up something unexpected. She wants to hear about the old days, back when Alusha trained under Beryl. That gets Alusha's attention. She sits back down. Rose explains she didn't train under Beryl for long. She was constantly on the move from country to country, but the one time she saw Beryl fight, it left a mark. His sword skills blew her away, and from that moment, she wanted to learn everything she could. Luicha can relate. Back when she was just a kid, she didn't realize how lucky she was to train under him. Beryl used to tell her she had potential, though she always felt he only said that to keep her going. Then one day, she finally nailed a move he'd taught her, and he told her she was ready. That was the last lesson she ever had with him. It's clear to Rose that Alusha still thinks highly of Beryl. Even now, he's still the same laid-back swordsman, just older and wiser. Just then, Rose spots a kid nearby. He looks lost and kind of confused, so she walks over to check on him. The boy flinches at first, but quickly says he lost his mom and got separated in the crowd. Alusha suggests taking him to the guards, but Rose shakes her head. She doesn't think it's that serious yet. The boy doesn't look dirty, tired, or scared. He's not even crying. That means he probably just got separated a few minutes ago, and his mom should still be nearby. Alusha thinks about it, and yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. To get more info, Rose gently asks the boy his name. He says it's Ritter. Then she asks if he remembers what his mom was wearing. He thinks for a second and says she had a red fluffy outfit and long hair. Alusha's impressed Rose could get that much so easily, but Rose just smiles and says she's always been good with kids. They look around, but the crowd is thick. So instead of searching aimlessly, Rose does something bold. She starts yelling out loud for Ritter's mom, calling her to come get her son. Alusha is a little embarrassed by how loud and direct Rose is being, but it's working. Meanwhile, back at Beryl's place, he's deep in thought. Everything that happened today is starting to come together in his mind. Every assassin they caught had taken their own life before they could talk. That kind of loyalty isn't normal. The only time he saw something that extreme was when he fought one of the bishop's knights. A guy who believed in his cause so much that he'd rather die than fail. If that's the kind of people they're up against now, then this attack wasn't the end. And tomorrow, they're probably coming back. Just as Beryl and Lucy were finishing up their intense talk, Mui came back into the house. That felt like the right moment to wrap things up. so Lucy said she'd head out. With the house quiet again, Beryl looked at Mui and asked if she was up for starting dinner a bit early. Back in town, Rose and Alucia finally managed to find Ritter's mom. The woman was overjoyed and thanked them again and again before taking Ritter's hand and heading off. Alucia turned to Rose and said it was really sweet how she cared so much about kids. Rose shared that her parents used to run an orphanage, so she grew up surrounded by children. To her, kids are the heart of any country. If you don't protect them, the future's lost. Alucia nodded. She couldn't agree more. The sun was going down, so Alucia said it was time to head back to base. They thanked each other and went their separate ways for the night. The next morning, all the knights gathered again. Alucia gave them an update. The royal tour with Prince Glenn and Salacia was still happening, even after everything that went down. Beryl was shocked. He figured there'd be no way they'd risk it again. But later, Alucia explained. This was Prince Glenn's decision, and both kingdoms had already agreed. Backing out now would just make Glenn look weak, and they couldn't afford that. Even if it's risky, Glenn wanted to push forward. As the convoy got ready to move, Goga pulled Beryl aside at the gate. He told him that one of the attackers from yesterday was someone he used to serve with. It was Hennis, the former vice commander who disappeared before Rose took over the squad. Having someone like Hennis involved in a plot to kill the prince? That's a huge mess. Goga made it clear, if Hennis shows up again, he wants to be the one to handle him. Beryl asked if Alucia knew, and Goga said he'd brought it up during the last debrief. Later on, the convoy made it to the farmlands. Glenn seemed stunned by the golden wheat fields stretching out in every direction. Beryl was impressed too. It was his first time seeing something like this. Kiri mentioned it's even prettier when the weather's clear, but today was cloudy and dull. Beryl made a mental note to come back here on a better day, during his time off. Suddenly, the caravan came to a stop. Gatoga moved to open the carriage, and before Glenn stepped out, he quietly asked if this was really where he wanted to stop. Glenn said yes. Salacia's safety came first, and if this was the plan, they were sticking to it. He wasn't going to back down just because of what happened yesterday. So Glenn and Salacia stepped down to inspect the wheat fields as scheduled, even if barely anyone was around to see it. Then, it happened. An arrow zipped past Glenn's head, missing him by inches. The ambush had started again. This time, the attackers had archers hidden in the crops, raining down arrows. Knights rushed to cover Glenn and Saladia, but it wasn't just archers. Fighters with blades came charging out of the fields too. Beryl sprang into action, slicing down enemies as fast as he could. The others followed, but they were outnumbered. This wasn't going to be easy. While Beryl was cutting his way through the chaos, an assassin leapt at him from the tall grass. But just before he reached him, the guy was hit with 2 arrows right in the chest. Beryl froze for a second. Why would they shoot their own man? He grabbed the body to use as a temporary shield while he regrouped. Then he saw it again. Another assassin got taken out by an arrow right between the eyes. 2 more enemies rushed forward without even reacting. That's when Beryl figured it out. These archers weren't taking out their allies on purpose, they were just bad shots. And clearly, none of them cared about friendly fire. Not even a little. Even for someone like Beryl, dodging this much chaos while fighting at close range was starting to wear him down. Kiri was losing steam too, and one of the enemies managed to slip past her, sprinting toward Glenn. Luckily, Henlet stepped in and cut the guy down just in time. But they were getting overwhelmed fast. Beryl shouted to Alucia, telling her to get Glenn and Salacia back to the carriage, where they could protect them better. He'd hold off the attackers as long as he could. Later, Beryl was making his way through the woods after slicing through yet another wave of enemies. That's when he ran into Rose. She looked at him, impressed, and told him he was seriously strong. Beryl gave her a quick thanks. He'd been through hell to get here. But there was no time to relax. It was time to settle things. Both of them drew their swords. The fight wasn't over yet. Beryl had his doubts about Rose for a while, but now things were finally coming together. He figured she must have taken out her own teammates to get here, but surprisingly, she hadn't. She said it was easy to just knock them out and slip away to finish the job herself. But with Beryl, She knew it wouldn't be that simple. She wanted to know how long he'd been on to her. For Beryl, the moment everything felt off was back at the theater. She had taken down an assassin with lethal force, something someone of her skill didn't need to do. She could have just disabled him. But instead, she made sure he wouldn't talk. That was the first red flag. Then there was the other strange thing, how so many assassins had managed to slip through the area Rose was supposed to be guarding. It was too suspicious. Beryl figured out she was letting them through on purpose. He didn't understand why she'd go this far. Was Prince Glenn becoming king really that much of a problem? For Rose, the answer was yes. In her eyes, what she was doing was necessary. Her country was falling apart. Children were starving, the streets were cold, and the people had nothing. To her, taking out Glenn was part of fixing that. Beryl couldn't argue much with politics. He never cared for that world. But as her former teacher, he couldn't let her keep going down a path that would only lead to more bloodshed. Rose insisted she was doing it for the greater good, for those kids, but Beryl was sure the children she wanted to protect wouldn't want her to carry that weight on her hands. She knew she wouldn't be able to change his mind. So, without another word, she raised her sword. The fight began. But Beryl didn't strike back. He stayed on the defensive, dodging and blocking every blow. He didn't want to hurt her. Rose mocked him, wondering how he planned to stop her without fighting back. But Beryl stayed focused, looking for an opening. Anything that could end this without killing her. He spotted it. The ground was muddy, and Rose shifted her weight just enough for him to read her next move. As she went for a big swing, he ducked under and left her completely exposed. He could have ended it right then, but he didn't, and she knew it. She couldn't beat him, and she finally admitted that to herself. But she still didn't stop, because failing now meant something worse. The kids back at the orphanage, they were being held hostage. The Pope had taken them and was using them to force Rose to carry out this plan. That changed everything. Beryl froze for a moment, stunned. This wasn't just politics. It was blackmail, and children were caught in the middle. Rose didn't think it made a difference. She still had a job to do. Glenn had to die, or those kids would. But something had changed in Beryl. For the first time, he looked truly angry, not at Rose, but at the whole situation, at the Pope, at the manipulation. Rose was shocked to see that expression on his face. Even though he didn't blame her directly, he knew what he had to do. The moment had come, and it wasn't easy, but he couldn't risk letting her complete her mission. If this was the only way to stop it, then he had to be the one to do it. Rose charged, and Beryl met her head-on. He blocked her attacks, dodged her movements, and even though she had a shield to protect her, it also limited her options. She managed to scratch his cheek, but that was all she could do. Her shield made it hard to land a solid hit, just as it made it hard for him to land one on her. They clashed again and again. But deep down, neither of them really wanted this fight. Beryl jumped back into the fight, swinging with all he had. But Rose's shield made it tough to get a clean hit. It blocked his view, threw off his timing, and made it hard to guess what she'd do next. Still, Beryl waited for the right moment. And when Rose went in for another heavy strike, he shifted his stance, knocked her sword to the side, not perfectly, but enough. And that gave him just the opening he needed. This time, he didn't hesitate. His blade came down hard, slashing her across the chest. Blood hit the ground, and Rose stumbled back, realizing she might actually die here. She always knew Beryl was strong, but she didn't think he had something like that in him. Beryl admitted he was just going with instinct, pure reaction. If she'd come at him again, the same move probably wouldn't have worked. That's why he had to end it in one go. Rose, barely staying on her feet, asked him to finish the job. If she was going to die, she wanted it to be at the hands of her teacher. But Beryl couldn't do it. He didn't want her dead. He wanted her to live, to take responsibility, to fix what she'd done. After all, he felt like part of this was his failure too, as her mentor. Just then, Gatoga arrived and was shocked to see Rose so badly injured. Without wasting a second, he started healing her with magic. Beryl asked what had happened with the archers, and Gatoga said he'd taken care of them. But when he saw Rose heading into the woods alone, he came after her to help. He could stop the bleeding, but the damage was bad. Rose wasn't going to die right away, but she needed serious care. Wanting to understand, Gatoga asked how this even happened. Beryl told him that Glenn and Salacia had been protected and were safely out of danger. But as for Rose, he admitted it. He was the one who struck her down. Gatoga was stunned, but Beryl went on. Rose had been working with the attackers, and though it hurt to say, she'd helped carry out the assassination attempt. Rose didn't deny it, she confirmed everything. But Beryl also added the part that changed everything. The Pope had taken children from Rose's orphanage as hostages, using them to force her into helping. That hit Gatoga hard. He couldn't believe the Pope would stoop so low, but after seeing how easily his assassins gave their lives, maybe it wasn't that surprising. Now, finding and rescuing those children had to be their top priority. But first, Gatoga asked a favor from Beryl, one that might cost them both. He wanted to tell everyone that Rose had fought bravely against Hennis, the real mastermind, and was wounded in the process. Rose chuckled weakly, saying that lie could get them into trouble. But Gatoga knew the truth would mean a death sentence for her. He wasn't about to let that happen. Beryl was confused. Why would Gatoga risk everything to protect Rose? Then Gatoga told him Rose was his stepsister. They weren't related by blood, but they'd grown up together. She was family. He had to protect her. Beryl was surprised but respected it. He promised to keep quiet and not tell anyone the truth. Still, out of curiosity, he asked Gatoga where he stood. Was he with the Pope or the Prince? Gatoga said that as a knight commander, he was supposed to stay neutral, but personally, he supported Prince Glenn. Rose spoke up again, saying she'd never really trusted the royal family. The Pope had told her that Bishop Rivios was falsely accused, that the charges were made up to get rid of him. Beryl immediately shut that down. Rivius was guilty, no question. Beryl was the one who'd taken him down. He'd seen the horrors with his own eyes. Rivius had used criminals to dig up corpses, trying to create some twisted miracle of resurrection. That kind of magic was forbidden and disgusting. Rose was speechless. For the first time, she saw the truth. The Pope had lied to her, maybe even about the children. She felt everything inside her crumble. Beryl couldn't say much about the Pope himself. He'd never met the man. But he told Rose to rethink who she was trusting. It hurt. All the fighting, the betrayal, everything. Was it all for nothing? But Rose decided something right then. She wouldn't die until she made things right. She had to see justice done and fix the damage she'd caused. She was still too injured to move on her own, so Gatoga picked her up, ready to carry her back. Beryl asked him to take care of her. Gatoga agreed, but reminded him that everything they were doing came with serious risks. If they wanted to protect Rose, they'd have to keep everything that happened in the woods a secret. And Beryl was ready to do just that. While Alucia, Huni, and Hembelitz had managed to take down all the assassins near the carriage, they couldn't let their guard down just yet. There might still be more hiding nearby. Lucia told Hembelitz to keep watch over the carriage. She wanted to go check on Beryl. But just as she said that, Beryl appeared, walking out of the trees. Everyone was relieved to see him. He explained that he had gone into the forest with Rose to help reduce the number of enemies. Unfortunately, Rose had been seriously hurt during the fight, so he sent her with Ataba to get medical help. The good news? He didn't think any more attackers would be showing up today. Alucia nodded and said she'd get fresh horses ready so they could head home right away. Once they made it back to the training hall, Alucia shared the latest news from the higher-ups. The tour of the agriculture district was officially canceled. Thankfully, there were only a few injuries on their side, so the royal family's public image wouldn't suffer too much. However, they would need to pay the farmers for the crops that got ruined during the battle. Just then, one of the knights walked up and handed Alucia a letter from the royal family. When she opened it, she found out she'd been invited to a state banquet as a reward for her outstanding performance. Beryl smiled and congratulated her. It sounded like a pretty big deal. But then Alucia noticed something else. Beryl's name was on the invitation too. He sighed. Looked like he'd have to go, whether he wanted to or not. When the day of the banquet came, Beryl sat stiffly at a long table filled with important people from across the kingdom. He had no idea how he ended up in a place like this. Meanwhile, Alucia looked totally calm. Then again, as a knight commander, she probably attended events like this all the time. Eventually, King Gladio and Princess Salatia arrived. Once seated, the king personally thanked Alucia for protecting his daughter. Beryl was impressed. She was speaking so casually with the king like it was no big deal. Then the king turned to Beryl and said he'd heard how vital Beryl had been during the attack. Even Salatia chimed in, saying how amazing he looked while cutting through enemies. Beryl didn't think he'd done anything that special, but the king seemed genuinely grateful. Then came a surprise. The king had an announcement to make. He told everyone that Salatia was set to marry Prince Glenn. The wedding would take place in Sveen soon, but since that country was going through some political unrest, the king was nervous about sending his daughter there alone. That's why he wanted to create a special royal guard just for her, and he was thinking of asking Beryl to lead it. Beryl immediately panicked inside. He didn't want that job, but how could he say no to the king? Thankfully, Alucia spoke up just in time. She told the king that Beryl's presence was too important to the Knight Order here, and they couldn't afford to lose him. Hearing that, the king dropped the idea. But before moving on, he added one more thing. He'd heard that Beryl was a Swordmaster, and as such, he hoped Beryl would keep using those skills to protect the kingdom. Beryl froze. Swordmaster? That title felt too big for him. Sure, he'd heard it before, probably from Alucia, but he never truly believed it. Especially since he had never even managed to beat his own father in a sparring match. After the banquet, Beryl returned home and showed Mui the gift he'd received from the palace. A beautiful glass plate. It looked expensive, too nice to eat off of. But putting it on a shelf didn't feel right either. He wasn't sure what to do with it. Eventually, Beryl made a decision. Back in his hometown, his father received a package, a carefully wrapped plate, with a letter from Beryl. In it, Beryl explained how he got the plate at the royal banquet, but felt it was too valuable to keep for himself. He wanted his father to have it. He also mentioned that the king had mistakenly called him a Swordmaster, but Beryl didn't believe he was worthy of that title, not yet. His father smiled as he read the letter. He wished Beryl could see how skilled he truly was, but he also underestimated himself because he always wanted to be better, to keep improving, and that made him proud, because if Beryl had come this far already, then the journey ahead could be even greater. With this, our Season 1 comes to an end.